What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you, but they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it. This is episode 49 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter.
This is episode 49 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter.
Do you know who you really are and what you're capable of?
Do you know who you
I'm sure you think
really
so.
are and what you're capable of?
But just because you believe something doesn't
I'm
make
sure
it
you
true.
think so.
Denial is the ultimate
But just because you believe something doesn't make
worry,
it true.
you're not alone.
Denial is
in
the
every
ultimate
town,
comfort
in every
zone.
country, all
Don't
over the
worry,
world,
you're not alone.
millions
In every
roam the
town, in
streets,
every country,
dead-eyed
all
as
over the world,
zombies.
millions
Addicted
roam
to
the
comfort,
streets,
embracing
dead-eyed
a
as
victim's
zombies.
mentality and unaware
Addicted
of their
to comfort,
true potential.
embracing a victim's mentality,
I know
and
this
unaware
because
of their
I meet
true
and hear
potential.
from them all the time.
I
And
know
because
this
just
because
like you,
I meet
I used
and
to be
hear
one
from
of
them
them.
all the time. And because just
I had
like
a damn
you,
good
I used to be
excuse
one of
too.
them.
Life dealt me a bad hand. I was born broken, grew up with beatdowns, was tormented in school, and called the N-word more times than I could count. We were once poor, surviving on welfare, living in government-subsidized housing, and my depression was smothering. I lived life at the bottom of the barrel, and my future forecast was bleak. Very few people know how the bottom feels, but I do. It's like quicksand. It grabs you, sucks you under, and won't let go. When life's like that, it's easy to drift and continue to make the same comfortable choices that are killing you over and over again. But the truth is, we all make habitual, life, self-limiting choices. It's as natural as a sunset and as fundamental as gravity. It's how our brains are wired, which is why motivation is crap. Even the best pep talk or self-help hack is nothing but a temporary fix. It won't rewire your brain. It won't amplify your voice or uplift your life. Motivation changes exactly nobody. The bad hand that was my life was mine and mine alone to fix. So I sought out pain, fell in love with suffering, and eventually transformed myself from the weakest piece of crap on the planet into the hardest man God ever created. Or so I tell myself. Odds are you have had a much better childhood than I, and even now might have a damn decent life. But no matter who you are, who your parents are, or where you live, what you do for a living, or how much money you have, you're probably living about 40% of your true capability. Damn shame. We all have the potential to be so much more. Years ago, I was invited to be on a panel at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I'd never set foot in a university lecture hall as a student. I'd barely graduated high school. Yet, I was at one of the most prestigious institutions in the country to discuss mental toughness with a handful of others. At some point in the discussion, an esteemed MIT professor said that we each have genetic limitations, hard ceilings, that there are some things we just can't do no matter how mentally tough we are. When we hit our genetic ceiling, he said, mental toughness doesn't matter, and it doesn't enter into the equation. Everyone in that room seemed to accept his version of reality because this senior, tenured professor was known for researching mental toughness. It was his life's work. It was also a bunch of bullcrap. And to me, he was using science to let us all off the hook. I'd been quiet until then because I was surrounded by all these smart people feeling stupid. But someone in the audience noticed the look on my face and asked if I agreed. And if you ask me a direct question, I won't be shy. There's something to be said for living it instead of studying it, I said, then turned toward the professor. What you said is true for most people, but not 100%. There will always be the 1% of us who are willing to put up and put in the work to defy the odds. I went on to explain what I knew from experience, that anybody can become a totally different person and achieve what so-called experts like him claim is impossible. But it takes a lot of heart, will, and armored mind. Heraclitus, a philosopher born in the Persian Empire back in the 5th century BC, had it right when he wrote about men on the battlefield. Out of every 100 men, he wrote, 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are just targets, 9 are the real fighters, and we are lucky to have them, for they make the battle. Ah, but one is a warrior. From the time you take your first breath, you become eligible to die. You also become eligible to find your greatness and become the one true warrior. But it is up to you to equip yourself for the battle ahead. Only you can master your mind, which is what it takes to live a bold life filled with accomplishments most people consider beyond their capability. I'm not a genius like those professors at MIT, but I am that one warrior. And the story you are about to read, the story of my effed up life, will illuminate proven path to self-mastery and empower you to face reality. Hold yourself accountable. Push past pain. Learn to live and love what you fear. Relish failure. Live it to your fullest potential and find out who you really are. Human beings change through study, habit, and story. Through my story, you will learn what the body and mind are capable of and when they're driven to maximum capacity and how to get there. Because when you're driven, whatever is in front of you, whether it's racism, sexism, injuries, divorce, depression, obesity, tragedy, or poverty, becomes fuel for your metamorphosis. The steps laid out here amount to the evolutionary algorithm, one that obliterates barriers, glimmers with glory, and delivers lasting peace. I hope you're ready. It's time to go to war with yourself. And that is the opening to a book called Can't Hurt Me by the author David Goggins. Now, if you're not familiar with David Goggins, he's got quite the story. He was a Navy SEAL, but only after a lot of trial and error. He went through a lot of adversity getting to where he was just to be able to try out for the Navy SEALs. And it's not even this the story. You read this story of his, and it blows your mind knowing that somebody actually goes through that, and then the person that he is today. Now, I don't have David Goggins on the show today. So some of you that were thinking, oh, here we go. No. However, what is written in that opening, what was written in that epilogue of that book that I just read, that can be said for a lot of people. A lot of people go through life and they go through adversity and they go through their traumas and they go through their challenges in life and they come out on the other side bigger, better, and badder than they ever thought they could be. Think about it. If I were to say there's a girl that was a clerk at a Nordstrom's, and I said she got shot and she came through that, and you'd think, wow, that's a strong girl. But if I said there was a police officer that got shot and almost died, what would you say? Oh, that's part of their job. Is it part of their job? Is it something that they do? There's a firefighter that goes into a house and he succumbed to smoke inhalation, or the building, the ceiling collapsed on him. Well, that's his job. But if I said, hey, there's just some girl that was once again an employee at a Nordstrom's, and she decides building falls on her. Is that her job? We feel sorry for her. We do, right? So the difference is that one has signed up, the firefighter signed up for it, the police officer signed up for it. The girl from Nordstrom's didn't necessarily sign up for that, right? Well, I'm going to say you're wrong, because that girl from Nordstrom's ultimately grows up and says, you know what? I want to be a police officer. I want to be a firefighter. I want to go do something more. And then the stuff happens. It doesn't matter that there's 20 years in between those times, or does it? Because your mind changes, your mindset evolves and becomes something more. And on today's show, we have a guest who was just that. She was just a clerk, just an employee at a Nordstrom's one day, and decided to change her life and become something more, become a police officer, and go beyond that and let her mind just say, I'm not going to put up with this crap anymore, and I'm going to do what I know I can do to help other people. And in doing that, tragedy struck. And we're going to hear about that today by a wonderful, wonderful person who I have had the honor to meet. She's a former police officer. She works with the Wounded Blue. You guys might remember them. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lindsay McCall to the What's a Hero podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming on.
I'm going to make one small correction. Otherwise, my husband will lose his mind. It's Lindsay McCall Long. I'll forget the long part because he's just like, and I'm like, hey, listen, McCall is my maiden name. I took it as my middle name. And I was like, but I think it's cool. Like, I think McCall is such a cool name, but he's just like, make sure they say Long.
Lindsay McCall Long to the What's a Hero podcast. Now I can either edit that or I'm going to leave that in. And I think I might just leave it in.
I think we should leave it in just
because I don't mind being corrected. I get used to it because it happens quite a bit. So
no, you're fine.
So that I'm assuming that's fairly accurate though. You just used to be just some kid that worked at a clothing store and said, you know what, I'm going to change my life one day, right?
I was a college kid actually, and you know, you tell a more romanticized version of how I got to where I am, and I actually used to just go with that version. And people, you know how people will ask, you probably get this question like, did you want to be a police officer ever since you were little? You know, we get that question a lot.
Yeah.
And I used to tell people yes, because the real answer wasn't as sexy, right? So the real answer is no, I didn't want to be a police officer since I was a kid. The real answer is that I needed a job after I graduated from college. That's what the real answer is. But what I didn't realize is, you know, when I kind of look back over the timeline of my life, I think I was destined to be where I ended up as a police officer, and even where I am now with doing peer support for first responders.
Right. So who was little Lindsay? Who was little Lindsay McCall? Who was that girl?
Well,
how did she grow up?
Ask.
Yeah. How did she grow up? What was her thing?
So little Lindsay was born in the Bay Area in California. Both of my parents were in the music business. So my dad was a musician. He was a drummer and the co-founder of a funk band called Confunction. And my mother worked very closely with the group. And then she eventually went on to become the vice president for MC Hammer's management company.
Oh, wow. So that's cool.
Yeah. So I'm, you know, as my mother says, me and my brother, my younger brother who lives here in Arizona with me, we're rock and roll babies. I grew up around musicians and things like that. And it was nothing to me to hang out in the recording studio. Like that was my everyday growing up, being on a tour bus with my dad's group would go certain places or were in the city where we were living. So I had an interesting childhood, a very fun childhood. And then what's funny is people are always like, oh, are there any other cops in your family? And there is my grandfather on my father's side. But I wasn't as close to him. So there's a lot about his police career I didn't know, but it is kind of neat because his former partner reached out to us after he'd found out both my dad and my grandfather had passed away, and sent us a really cool black and white picture of him and my grandfather sitting in their patrol car. Now, mind you, this is, you know, back in the 60s, I believe. And my grandfather was the first Black sheriff's deputy in the area where he worked. And so it's this really cool black and white portrait or picture, of my grandfather and his partner who is white. And so he was actually able to tell some really cool stories about the two of them being out on the beat together. And obviously there's racial tension going on back in the 60s, and stories and just them having a really good time getting to know each other. And they bonded over music and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool. And I wish I'd had the opportunity to have more of a conversation with my grandfather about, you know, his job and things that he experienced. So in a way, yes, it is in my family. But at the same time, I just kind of like to do things other people weren't doing. So I'm definitely that kid who I was a was a tomboy, and I wanted to do whatever the girls were not doing. So I didn't want dolls. I didn't want anything pink. I was just kind of out doing my thing. You can ask my mother. I'm very much independent, and Lindsay wants what Lindsay wants, and don't bother Lindsay. I'm now getting payback for that because I have a 5-year-old that's very much like that. Um, and when I was in high school, actually, I was in ROTC in high school, Air
Uh-huh.
Force Junior ROTC. And I almost changed my class schedule because it was one of those things I'd signed up for like the year before. And I
Mhm.
forgot about it over the summer. And I got my schedule and I was like, I don't want to be in this class. Like, I want to get out of here. And I was like, I'm going straight to the counselor when I'm done. And then that first day of class, the instructor, her name is Major Cheryl Greer. She's retired Air Force. She gave out positions, and I ended up with a position. So I'm like, well, now I feel obligated to stay, right?
Ah,
Um, I'm kind of the shy kid. I wanted to sit in the back. I didn't want to be bothered. And as time went on, I found that I really liked that environment. I liked the structure. I liked, how we had the rank and everybody had their jobs and you knew what your responsibility was. And over time, I actually flourished in that environment. I went from being the shy kid who could barely stand up in front of anybody and speak to having to do all of our speeches for all of our ceremonies until I graduated. Like
oh
she
wow, that's
legit
cool.
like forced me to do it. And I'm trying to tell her, I'm like, hey, Major Greer, so listen, I have stage fright. um, my mom attempted, well, she didn't attempt. My mom put me in a drama class because my mom majored in drama and lighting at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And she thought this would be great for me. And I'm like, absolutely not. That's my younger brother. That's not me. And I'm trying to talk my way out of it. She doesn't want to hear it. She says, Miss McCall, I didn't ask all that. I told you to go practice the speech. And I get out of my office, please. You're dismissed. I was like, okay. So I practiced, drove everybody crazy. And she saw something in me apparently that I did not. And I'm very appreciative to her till this day for that. And then I would come back as a guest speaker. And I remember seeing other guest speakers thinking like, oh, these people are old. Ugh, look at these old people coming to talk to us teenagers. And then I became that old person.
Yeah, yeah,
Talking,
and you're not even
you know,
40, yeah.
and so um and yeah, so I started doing that, and now I have no problem getting in front of people. Major Greer was always there for me. I've put her name on every application I've ever had. I've worked
Mhm.
for 3 different police departments. She's always been one of my reference people.
And you're
Because
still
again,
in contact with her?
oh yeah, she's like a second mom to me, like for
Wow,
sure.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and so much like what you were talking about with the opening and like kind of the theme of your show, um, I learned that your circumstances don't have to define who you are.
Yeah.
Um, when I was 17, 2 weeks after I graduated from high school, my dad was shot and killed in a home invasion. Um,
Wow.
my parents were not together, but my dad lived down the street. He was always over at the house, and stuff. So we were very close still. And obviously that rocked my world. And I shared that with the kids one time because the landscape of my high school had changed a lot. We went from a lot of middle class, 2-parent households to kids, raised by single parents, teen parents, and a lot of kids that were in group homes also. And so ROTC was that structure for them. And Major Greer was like everybody's mom, whether you were in ROTC or not. She would take you under her wing and try to help you out. And
That's cool.
I remember sharing that story with the kids one time because there's a show on TV1 called Unsung. TV1 is like it's a black media station, and their Unsung is almost like VH1's Behind the Music, where they
Okay.
talk about groups and
Uh-huh.
stuff like that, and their trials and tribulations and successes and Confunction. My dad's group was featured on there, and my brother and I were featured on towards the tail end of that episode. And obviously, they asked me how I wanted my dad. I think they asked me something like how I wanted my dad to be remembered or something like that. And I said, people struggle, people go through things. And I don't want how he died or the struggles that he had to define who he is, because he was so much more than that. You
Right.
know, he's a father, he was a husband, he was a brother, he was a friend, he was all these things. Um, and I remember playing that clip for the kids, and then the lights came back on. So the kids are just kind of sitting there looking at me. And I said, you know, how's everybody feeling? What's everybody thinking? And I had a couple of the kids say, well, we didn't realize that about you. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, your dad had died the way he did. And I said, what was there to realize? They said, well, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, how you dress and everything, like we would not have known that. And I said, well, that's the point I want you all to get. You don't have to wear your trauma on the outside, because if I were to do that, I'm not honoring my father's legacy in any way, shape, or form. You
Right.
know, and then we kind of get into woe is me, and woe is me only lasts for a certain amount of time before people are like, we get it.
Right.
You know, so my dad's been dead for 25 years this summer. And, you know, if I were still walking around like, oh, you know, my dad got murdered, I can't do anything, that's on me. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not benefiting myself, I'm not benefiting him or anything that he stood for by staying there. And that's something I definitely wanted to share with the kids. So that was kind of cool and an interesting way for me to figure out like my theme, I
Mhm.
guess, when I'm talking to people and I'm talking to young kids that are in crappy situations, you know, and I want them to understand that somebody that walked those same halls um, has come out of a otherwise crappy situation, but has arrived in a good place as well.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you know, so
So
that was, you know, me when I was younger, and then
yeah. So
went off to college. And
were you when you were in school, were you an outside player? Did you go outside and play all the time? Did you sit inside and watch TV and
oh
play
no,
instruments or anything like that?
all of those things actually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, when back, you know, growing up, when we were younger, kids could go outside and roam the neighborhood, you know, and
Sure.
especially
Yeah.
in the summertime,
Yeah.
we'd leave the house and we wouldn't come back until later. And that was like
The
at the
lights,
age of,
the lights on. That's how
yeah,
you knew.
exactly. Like, I mean, the age my kids are now, like I have a 7.5-year-old and a 5-year-old. We
Yeah.
would go and just be out, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so, me and my brother loved playing outside. We loved, like, we would put these little bags together with our spy equipment, and I'm using like air
Air
quotes.
quotes. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and we would make forts and we would climb trees and we would take notes and be like, well, what did you see? Well, I saw this, and we would sneak around the house, and so not to be seen, and spy on our parents and things like that. But you know, I played an instrument for a short amount of time. I am not musically inclined, so I'm gonna tell you
Which is
that right
weird,
now.
you know, you grow up in a music studio and
Right,
not so
right.
much. Huh?
I'm a great appreciator of music. I love live music. I love concerts. Love it, love
Mhm.
it, love it. I love the energy. I love watching people's reaction. I'm definitely a crowd watcher when I go to
Mhm.
events like that. But but yeah, so I played saxophone for a little bit of time. I think my brother played piano for a bit. But yeah, we did a little bit of everything. We played video games. We would,
Active. You were
yeah,
doing stuff.
yeah,
You
yeah.
didn't just sit around and let other things happen, or you
Mm-mm.
yeah, so you were active. And that's, and that's kind of a theme that I noticed, as I've done this show, talked to everybody that I've talked to.
Mhm.
Their big thing is that we went out and did stuff. I never just sat and but that's kind of I don't know, a trait of the type of people in which I see as being the heroes that I interview for the show. And they go out and do things. Either when they were a kid, they would be outside playing, they'd be exploring, they'd be making sure
Mhm.
things happened. And they weren't a lot of obviously we didn't have cell phones and the internet and all that stuff back then when we were kids, but like they do now, where everybody just sits on their phone all the time. And you see all these
Mhm.
kids who look malnourished and incapable of doing anything to help themselves or help other people. And I say
Mhm.
that not 100%, nothing's ever 100%, but I say that to the point where, you see a lot of that and and then when you meet a couple, younger kids that are just gung ho, they're active, they're doing stuff, you see them going places, and you're like, wow, it's a joy to meet you because
It is
that's not the norm. And so when I talk to
100%.
people, I try to get that idea. Were
Mhm.
you an outside player? And you're like, yeah, yeah, of course I did. It makes sense
Yeah,
to me because yeah,
love it.
that's what I thought too. So, so you
Yeah.
went to college after high school.
Yeah. So I went. So okay, I wanted to go into the Air Force after high
Right.
school, right?
Maybe because
And
of
I
Major Greer's
oh big time.
influence. Yeah.
And I go in her office to get my paperwork signed off on, and she says, "I'm not signing that." And I was like, "Excuse me?" Like, I said, "I want to go into the Air Force." She's like, "No, I think you're better suited for school." And I was like, "But I do really well in here. And I feel like I would do really well in," and she's like, "I don't doubt that you would. I just feel like you're better suited for school." And I remember thinking so most of my very close friends from high school that I still speak to till this day
Mhm.
were all from ROTC, and they went into different branches of the military. And I remember saying to her, like, but most of my friends, even my best friend, they're going into the military. And she
Mhm.
looked at me and said, "Miss McCall, some of them need the military." And I was like, okay. And I didn't understand what that meant at the time. And she says, "Do me a favor, go to school, and if you don't like it, come back. I will gladly sign off on your paperwork, but just do me that favor." And I was like, okay. So now it's crunch time because I just knew I was going into the military. The funny thing is, I did visit the local fire station because I was curious about being a firefighter, which
Okay.
I forget about that part. And I'm like, man, that's so crazy. And then I ended up being talked into going to school first. And um now I got to scramble. I got to take the SAT because I hadn't planned on taking it because I wasn't going to college. I was
You
like,
did
I'm
your
here.
ASVAB and you're good. Yeah, you're gonna go
I Yeah,
military.
and
Yeah.
so she was like, she signed me up. She helped me find like the last time you could take it before graduation.
Mhm.
So I got accepted to a small school down in Savannah, Georgia. It was called Armstrong at the time. I think Georgia Southern has since purchased it, but I think it's just the Armstrong campus now.
Mhm.
But I go to this really small school down in Savannah, Georgia. And when I'm looking at majors, people were like, "Yeah, but you say you didn't want to be a cop when you were younger, but you majored in criminal justice." I said, "True, but I did that for a couple different reasons. One, I went to college because I knew my mom would still pay my bills. I'm spoiled. I will admit that."
Okay.
Okay. Two, I knew that I didn't want to get a full-time job immediately. And, obviously going into the military, you become an instant adult,
Mhm.
and I remind people, even though I grew up in the music business and I experienced a lot of things earlier than other kids did, I still grew up kind of sheltered too. And so I was like, well, I don't want to become an instant adult. I don't know how to do anything by myself. And I was like, but if I go to school, my mom will pay my bills. I picked criminal justice because I had the least amount of math classes and I don't like math.
There you go. There you go. I'm with you.
So,
I'm with you.
but I got into it. I really enjoyed the professor this one professor that I had. His name was Mr. Brown. I loved him so much because he was a retired police officer from Savannah PD.
Mhm.
After he retired, he went on to, I think he became like a counselor for at-risk youth, mainly males. And I
Mhm.
thought that was cool because this is somebody like from the community and that can speak from the job perspective, right?
Right. Yeah.
And nothing against people who've never been in the field, but to me, the energy is different when I know you don that uniform and you're speaking from real experience.
Right. It lends that credibility.
Right.
You're going to listen to somebody who's dressed the part. Now, taken from that idea, when I was in the Marine Corps, you go through boot camp and you have to learn all Marine Corps history all the way back to 1776. And what's cool is the instructor for each of those eras that he instructs, and it's like a week long history
Mhm.
class, and it was probably my favorite part of boot camp. But what's cool is every era that he's teaching about, he dressed that part. So he would
Okay.
so like you're talking about 1776 at Tun Tavern and signing up all these Marines while they're all drunk and then showing up at their house the next morning. Hey, you signed this paper, you're a Marine. What did I do? Nevertheless, I digress. Anyways, it's 1776, 1777. He was dressed like those guys were dressed back then with the with
Wow.
the short they look like capri pants or whatever, the
Mhm, mhm.
triangle hat and the long coat, the whole thing. So he's dressed like that. And then you move on to all the different eras, he would dress like that part. So it lended credibility. Obviously, I know this guy wasn't alive back in 1776. Of course not. However, dressing the part, you lend that credibility. And
Yes.
we know he's a Marine, so that's not an issue there. But when somebody is what they're talking about, they are what they're talking about. They're not just, they don't have knowledge of it, but they are it.
Yes.
You pay attention a little bit more because it makes a lot more sense.
Oh, 100%. And I took multiple classes from this one professor because of that. And then I ended up transferring to Georgia State, and which is in Atlanta. And I needed to do an internship to graduate. And I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do because I hadn't even planned on really being in this career. But now we're at crunch time, right?
Yeah.
Money has been spent, classes have been
Right.
taken.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, you know what? I'll just do the internship in the county for the county police department where I lived, which is Gwinnett County in Georgia. It's about 20, I'd say about 20 miles northeast of Atlanta. And it was like a 10-week internship. And I remember the first couple of weeks thinking, this is a dumb job. Like,
Really?
who wants to babysit adults all day? Like, you show up, you listen to somebody's issue, and you have to tell someone else how to live their life. And part of it was because I was only 23 years old. So I'm like, what is a 23-year-old going to be able to tell somebody who's older and I have to babysit you? Like, I don't want to do that.
Right.
You know?
You
And
you start realizing you got to start telling adults how to be adults when you're younger than they are. You're 50 something. Why am I
yes.
telling you to leave that other
And that's
person
how,
alone?
100%. And that's how I felt. I'm like, and yeah, I moved away and I lived in the dorms and had a little apartment for a little while. But again, I'm still kind of a sheltered kid. And then when I moved back, when I transferred to Georgia State, I was living back home with my mom, and again, I'm like, I don't know anything about life. Like, somebody else pays my bills. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
So I remember going on a call with a sergeant, and it was a shoplift call. And he tried to incorporate me into this call by talking to these young women. They were about my same age. And I remember thinking, like, I don't have anything to offer them, kind of thing. And he was like, well, just hold on tight. So he has like a real honest conversation with them about like the choices that they're making, how it's going to affect their future. One of them had their young baby with them, how this could affect their child's future. And, I just, that kind of stuck with me, and it kind of called on me because I think a lot of us in the first responder world, we're type A, and people generally come to us for help even before we were a first responder.
Yeah.
And I was always that person. Even in high school, I was that person. Like, I had people I didn't even know that would come to me to talk to me about problems. And I'm like, how do you know me? Like, I'm an ROTC geek. Like, I stay to myself over here. Why are you bothering me? But people would seek me out. And so I like helping people. And I tell people that sounds cheesy when people are like, oh, what's the best thing about being a police officer? And I said, I honestly enjoy helping people. And I don't enjoy helping people for my own ego. Just as humans, that's what we should do for one another, because we help to complete one another. We meet people in a certain space. So, you can, as we get to know each other better, you may have some things personality wise that I don't have that I may be drawn to, or be like, oh, wow. Like,
Yeah.
that's something I should think about, or I should do more often. So, the internship went on, and they kept saying, you should apply. And I was like, y'all don't want me. I am a college kid. Like, I don't know anything. I live at home with my mother. Like, what experience can I bring? And they're like, look, you got a degree. You did your internship here. Like, you'd be perfect for it. And I applied in April of 2003, and I got a job offer. It was either right before or right after my 24th birthday in October. And I'm on the phone with the background investigator, which is funny because he's actually an assistant chief right now at that same department. And I remember talking to him, and I said, are you sure you called the right person? And he's like, you're Lindsay McCall, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, but you do know I don't really have any life experience. Like, the worst thing that had happened to me, and obviously a big thing, was my dad dying. But I don't, and he's like, listen, do you want the job or not?
Yeah, we got a spot to fill. We need a body.
Yeah. So, academy started, and I remember like almost every day I would show up, I'm like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And then now you're thrown into the fray. Graduation happens. I was put at our smallest yet busiest district, which people were like trying to get out of that district all the time. I did my whole FTO period there, and then that's where I was permanently assigned. And I will say I learned a lot in the short amount of time I was at that, because I was only at Gwinnett for 4.5 years. Most of my time was at this particular precinct. And I remember a canine guy telling me one time, he says, when you talk to your academy mates that went to some of the sleepier parts of the county, you have double the experience that they do. And I was like, really? Because he thought I'd been at the department longer than I had. And we were tracking one time. And I was like, I've been here like maybe 2 years. He was like, I thought you'd been here like 5 years already, just from your disposition and how you handle calls.
Wow.
And I said, I got very lucky by being thrown into the fire. And then I enjoyed the job. Like, I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy figuring out, well, how can we get this person help, and putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and being more than just, I'm just going to show up and arrest somebody. Now, I didn't always have that attitude because I was young and impressionable, and, I have a uniform and you're going to listen to me. But over time, I realized that doesn't always work,
Right.
So
Right.
I would take the calmer approach after that. And then it just kind of led into, kind of where I am now.
So where did you ever see yourself? I mean, you go back, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years or whatever from there. Do you ever see yourself doing that? Or was it just, I mean, was it ever a possibility like, hey, that would be kind of neat, watch it on TV or whatever, see people, or it was just one of those things you're like that just, it just came out of nowhere for you?
I don't think it came out of nowhere. I was definitely into police shows growing up.
Mhm.
I watched all the, like the 80s police shows. You had your Cagney
Right.
and Lacey, you had Hunter. I know I'm dating myself, but
DJ
whatever.
Hooker and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, Chips, like
Yeah.
all those shows, even the ones in the 90s, NYPD Blue and Silk Stockings and Law and Order. Like, that was my show back then, Law and Order. So I was always very interested in that. And I don't, like I said, I don't think it completely came out of nowhere. And what's funny, and this is funny how the brain works sometimes. One of the last times I went as a guest speaker in ROTC, I found my senior memories book before I left. And I bought it to school to show the kids. And, they're flipping through. Of course, they're seeing pictures and da 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 da. And I had one girl ask me, like, what year did you graduate? I said in 97. And she was like, I was only 2 years old when you graduated. I was like, whoa, watch
Oh,
your
yeah.
mouth.
Yeah.
So, like,
It's funny. I'll do that now. We've got guys in our department who, they'll say, what year did you graduate? And I'll say, I'll let them know. Yeah, I'm not saying it. I've said it before. Rewind, go check the other episodes. Anyway,
gotcha.
I'm telling that to my guests, but anyways, for my listeners. But anyways, they would say, and they're like, oh, hey, I was only, however old, I wasn't even born yet. Some of them. And I'm like,
Oh,
what the heck, man?
that's not polite. It's
And then
not.
and then
And,
there's
ugh,
and then there's kid there's and I say kids because they're the same age as my kids.
yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
they're my partner for the day or whatever the case is. And it's just so funny.
It's
It's just really surreal is the deal.
Well,
That's what it
and
is.
it's funny because there was a part in the senior memories book, which I thought was a really cool exercise, and I had the kids do it that day. I don't know if they kept it, but there was like where will you be in 10 years page in the memory book.
Mm.
And it was asking, like, would you be living at home, or would you have your own place, your career, who would still be your friends, if your hair was longer, short, would you be married, like all these questions, and you filled it in.
Right.
Well, the funny thing is, well, I said I would be living on my own, but I was still living at home. Would your hair be longer, short? I thought my hair was going to be longer. I was actually rocking like a short haircut then. And then the friends part was true, except for one person. And then when it said, what will you be? And I do not remember writing this. Honestly, I don't. I wrote as a career, either a firefighter or a police officer.
Oh, weird.
And I don't remember writing that. I remember the firefighter part, but I think the police officer part was more because I always told people like I was interested in becoming an FBI agent because that sounded cool. I didn't mean it. It just
Right.
sounded cool, right?
Right.
So I just thought that was funny. Like when I'm flipping through it and I'm talking to the kids and I look at that and I was like, wow, like that's so crazy that,
That's funny.
that I said this is what I would be doing, and it was within that time frame. So I thought that was just kind of neat. And I told the kids, write stuff like that down, fold it up, and put it somewhere.
Mhm,
Maybe pull it out in
mhm.
5 years just to see where you are, but definitely pull it out in 10 years and see what has changed in your life, because that can kind of be your barometer for what you need to be doing or not doing in
Right,
life.
right. I mean, and you
You know,
determine whether or not you have the same passions or you've forgotten your passions because you're so bogged
Mhm.
down with life and chores
That
and
part.
errands and stuff like that. I've got there's a guy I speak to that he listens to the show, and I know he's probably listening right now. He's a super good guy. I've never met him personally, but he and I we talk back and forth on LinkedIn and whatever. And Mark, if you're listening, that's you, by the way.
Mhm.
Anyways, and he asked me one time, he goes, "What's your 5-year plan?" And I was like,
Mm.
and this is I'm in my 40s, and I say I didn't tell him, but I guess I'm thinking, I don't know what my 5-year plan is. I thought 5-year plan was something they asked you when you did an interview to
Facts.
get a job, and then all of a sudden, you don't have to think about it anymore if you have a job.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
but you're right, we have to continually evaluate our next
Yes.
steps and go and look at the future and see where you're
Mhm.
at, and so you can evaluate your former self, because we should and we can only compare ourselves to ourselves.
Yes.
We can't
Yes.
compare. I can't compare myself to you and your story. Just like
Mhm.
I can take good stuff from yours and be motivated and inspired by and say, hey, that worked for her, let me try it. But I can't say, oh man, Lindsay did so much better than me. And I can't compare myself and then beat myself up for it because I didn't do what
Mhm.
you did. So, but you're absolutely right. And Mark's right. Look at that 5-year plan, continually reassess yourself, because
Yep.
we're made to grow, we're made to progress and become better.
100%. Yeah. No, I totally, like, I remember this is probably like, I don't know, like maybe 5 years ago now. I remember saying, like, I want to start hanging out with people who are in a different industry than me
Hmm.
and who are constantly reaching for something higher. Because, what do they say? Like, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, right?
Right.
And like, if you're the top person in your circle, you're doing it wrong. Like, you
Hmm.
need to get out there and so start elevating. And, definitely living in Phoenix, there's a lot of different like networking groups and then people who are self-employed that I've come into contact with. And one of my former coworkers, his cousin, she's like that. She's into philanthropy and she does recruiting for executive recruiting for businesses and stuff. And man, she's always at some sort of event, right?
Hmm.
And shout out to her. She's getting married on Monday, the 28th. So congratulations. But I was like, I want to be in the room with her. I want to be in the room with her and the other people that she knows, because she's very much like that connector piece,
Yeah.
you know? And I mean, if you're in an event with her, she's going to give you the full rundown as that person's approaching. She makes a quick introduction and she pops smoke. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And then now, and I love that about her. And I said, you know what? I'm going to make more of an effort, and not in a superficial way, because I genuinely like her and her family,
Hmm.
but I want to hang out more. And I started doing that. And it started like opening up these other doors, and these other areas, because in first responder world, we get very stuck in our blue or our red world, right?
Hmm. Right.
And we only go to trainings with other cops or firefighters or EMTs. And we only go
We only have
to,
parties and
events,
barbecues and stuff like that with
that
other
part.
cops or
Yes.
other firefighters. Yes.
100%. And I said, and then you get out and you're like, oh shoot, there's like a whole nother world out here.
Yeah.
Some of it, I think it's comfort. We're just comfortable around each other. And
Hmm.
some of it is a little bit of intimidation also.
Hmm.
Because I don't like it when, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm not saying everybody, but we tend to talk down on ourselves as an industry, or we've all, if you haven't said it, you've thought it at some point. If you've thought about leaving the job to do something else, or you're getting closer to retirement and you're like, well, what am I going to do? And it's like, well, I only know how to do, I only know how to be a cop or a
Right.
firefighter. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I said, that is like some of the most abusive relationship language I've ever heard. And I've done it, because if you're in an abusive relationship and then you want to leave, the abuser will say, look at you. Who wants to be with you?
Right.
Nobody wants you. And we
Yeah.
tell ourselves that,
Uh-huh.
I only know how to do, and I can only, and I said, listen, even if you stay on the job for 5 years, you have gained so many skill sets that the average person will never develop. They will never, like, we have to wear different hats, like, every day. Like, it's not just, so anybody who is listening and they think they're just going to come into this job and they're just going to be the enforcer, you're doing it wrong from jump. I'm just telling you that right now,
Right.
because it's more than just taking people to jail. I can take people to jail. I can write tickets, but I can also be a person. I can also be a nurturer.
And
You
that's the
know.
easy part of our job, taking people to jail and
Mhm,
determining, hey, and you violated this crime here. And so
mhm,
here's the statute that says that you did this
mhm,
thing right here. You have to go to jail. And then I go write a report that basically says exactly that thing that the statute says.
mhm.
And I put the circumstances in there. And then I'm done. I'm moving on to the next thing. The thing that really is the harder part is getting up people and seeing their change and helping them change and staying with them and being there for them when they can. I've got problems, and hey, you can text me, call me, you can email me, whatever.
100%.
I'm happy to be here for you. So that's the hard part
Mhm.
that continues to make us work.
Well, and we're not that much different. I always remind people, like, yes, you have a uniform, but, well, it used to be you were one mistake away from not having a job. Now it seems like it's one perceived mistake away from not having a job. But, you don't know when you're going to cross paths with that person again. You don't know that person's story. And yes,
Right.
we see people on their worst day. We see them when they've made some of the worst decisions they could have made. But that doesn't mean you can't talk to them. That doesn't mean you can't offer them resources, and,
Mhm.
like, offer them resources, like you were saying, in like a real way, like getting to know what is going on with this person and giving them something so that we're not dealing with them in this fashion by taking them to jail.
Right.
If I was taking you to jail for a warrant, I would try to, I know I'm not in the back seat of the car, but I would say things like, listen, I get it. It sucks. But guess what? It's getting taken care of. Either you're
Mhm.
gonna, spend the night or a couple of days in jail and you're done, or they're gonna put you on a new payment plan. You don't have that lurking over you. You don't
Right.
have that every time you go to apply for a job or you apply for an apartment, that something comes up in your background. It's
Mhm.
being taken care of. And I said, today may suck, but tomorrow you have the option to choose a different path. And it's
Right.
not going to be immediate, And so, like, I was telling you before we got on, I have the opportunity to help teach virtual prenatal classes with the doctor who delivered my youngest child, and we do kind of like an affirmation portion of the
Mhm.
training
Mhm.
for the pregnant women. And one thing that I like, and I'm looking at it right now because I have it on my other computer monitor, is happiness is always available.
Right.
Like,
It
happiness is always available. You have to look for it, and it may be small, and I think we look for happiness in these big grandiose things, but happiness could be something small. That person that I took to jail that cleared that warrant, when they get out the next day, they may decide to take care of other business in their life
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
hanging over their head, or being honest with somebody in their life about this warrant and why they were gone all day,
Right.
or why they have so many court dates, and those are little things, and little things turn into big things. Like, a win doesn't have to be this on the national stage, you're getting an Olympic medal type, here's your trophy type win. It could just be, I got up this morning and put on pants because I've
Right.
been in the bed for the past week with depression.
You
That's an
know,
accomplishment for some
yeah.
people.
Yeah. You talk about those people that you tell that it's in the back seat of your patrol car, and hey, you're getting it taken care of. It's done with. And say you got a long drive to the jail, and once you get there, and it's maybe it's quiet for a little bit, and you
Mhm,
get there, and you're separating out because you're handing them over to the jailers, and they're doing the dress out, and you got to go do paperwork, whatever.
mhm.
There's that portion before you leave, and they say, hey, thank you. And
Oh, yeah.
or whatever, that little thing, you're like you said, that tiny little bit of happiness,
Yes, sir.
you might be
Mhm.
like, hey, I think I did. Whether I did reach them or not, time will tell. But I know that
I've totally had that.
I got I elicited some response out of this person, as
Mhm.
opposed to screw you, pig. That wasn't there.
No,
It could.
100%. And my goal a lot of times, and I would tell people like, I was the person who wore a uniform. I was not my uniform. If my uniform could have gone out every day and seen the things that I saw, experienced the things that I experienced mentally and physically, have at it. But guess what? There's a person in that uniform that is attached to a husband, kids, a mom, brothers, just family members, community, and all these other things. And I would lead my calls by being Lindsay, just simply being Lindsay. Because if you to me, you lose people when you lead your call with your uniform. Now, I also would give people the opportunity to start over on a call because you know how it is. The person that pissed them off is not there, but they see you and they're just going to be like, "Rawr."
Yeah,
You
now
let
they're
people vent.
through the
Yep.
roof a little bit. Yeah.
And it's fine. I get it. You got to get it out. And I would say that's fine. We can get it out, but let's deal with the issue at hand. And I'm not the one that pissed you off. I got called here because things got out of control. And I wasn't, just driving by. I was like, oh, what's going on in Ken's house?
Right.
Oh, look, I've walked into a domestic. It's
Yeah,
nothing
it
like
doesn't
that.
doesn't work
Things,
that way. Yes.
yeah, things got out of control. And then I got called here and I tell him, I said, listen, you want to continue talking to Lindsay because back then, both Officer McCall and then when I got married, Officer Long, because if Officer McCall or Long shows up, it's not going to be fun. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Right.
So you want to continue talking to me. So no matter what happens, whether I leave you here, write you a ticket, whether I take you to jail, whatever, you still just want to talk to Lindsay because there's going to be a point of no return where I don't want to hear anything. The line of disrespect has been crossed too many times. I have a crime and this is what's happening now. And I can always write in my report, although I arrested you for A, B, and C, you were very cooperative. You were very respectful. Or I can, I've had people curse me all up and down.
Mm-hmm. Threaten your family and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Oh, all of it. All of it. And so I tell people your attitude will determine kind of how this goes. I can write that you were cooperative, or I can write that you cursed me up and down, and I just showed up to handle the call. So it's all about, to me, like being a person, being real, and not thinking that you're better than someone else. Because once you get into that, that's where you start getting in trouble.
Exactly. And I think humility is a huge thing, and that has to envelop our position where we're at. And it doesn't matter whether it's police position or, teacher or speaker or parent or whatever. We've got to remain humble no matter what we do, because there's always somebody bigger, better, and badder than us. And
100%.
if you don't believe that, then you are sorely mistaken. You have another thing coming. So you work for, you mentioned that you're in Phoenix, but you were in Gwinnett just a little bit ago. And how do we ever get from Gwinnett to the other side of the country?
So my cousin was living out here in Phoenix, and I was just kind of at a point in my career and in my personal life where I was looking for something new. I just needed something different. And, a lot of people felt that I was stupid for even considering leaving my first apartment because, I was well known. I had the opportunity to go to a few different units if that was my choice. But I just felt like inside I needed something else. My cousin was out here and he's like, you should come. And I'm like, first of all, it is dry, brown, and hot. Why do I want to come to the desert? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Not only that, but some people know this, some people don't. But at that time, Arizona didn't observe Martin Luther King Jr. Day as like a holiday.
Oh, really?
And I said, I can't come from the land of MLK to somewhere that doesn't observe that as a holiday. Now, eventually they did. I think it has more to do with the fact that the Super Bowl says, well, we're not going to come there if you don't. It's about, I'm rubbing my fingers together.
Might be a little bit of,
about, a little scratch involved in that. So I was like, absolutely not. So eventually they said, okay, we'll do it. But that wasn't my reason for coming to visit. I just like to tell that part of the story. And I said, fine, I'll just come and visit. I can't promise anything. I got out here. The weather was nice. Obviously, I didn't come in the summer when it's like the devil's taint outside. Okay. I came in the spring. It was nice. You can be active pretty much year round here, even when it's hottest.
187,000 degrees.
Yes. You can go to northern Arizona, you can go to southern Arizona. You know, if you want snow, you can go up to Flagstaff and there's snow right now. And they have the grid system. Like, why all cities aren't built on a grid system, I will never know. Like, it is so easy to get around. You just give cross streets and boom, you're off.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? I'll think about it. My cousin knew some people that worked at some police departments out here. He put me in contact with a couple people, and I just started asking questions, started looking at areas. And then the department that ended up picking me up was Paradise Valley. It's a small department. It's like in an affluent area. It's so funny because it's so small that the neighboring departments didn't realize there was a whole police department there. They're like, oh, I thought that was our jurisdiction. So that's how small it is. Like, when I was there, like from top to bottom, including the chief, there were 28 people.
Oh, wow.
So
I got you beat. I got you beat.
Oh,
I worked at a department that had 4 of us, including the chief.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
You do have me
Yeah.
beat. That's awesome.
Well,
I think
that's not my department now. My department now is a little bit bigger. However, I did work at a department where it was, and so there was 4 of us. You were one person on at a time.
Well, when I came from an apartment, I think at that time, Gwinnett's bigger now, but Gwinnett had about 650 to 700 people. And then I come down to a much smaller place where there's not a lot of like foot traffic. You know, you can stop people, or there wasn't a whole bunch going on. You know, if you were a traffic person, which I am not, ask any supervisor I've ever worked for, I am not a ticket person. You could get a lot of good DUIs and stuff like that coming through, because we were like a go-between between Phoenix and Scottsdale to go to some of the clubs and the bars and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, you know, I ended up, you know, out here, and I enjoyed it. I met some really great people at at Paradise Valley Police Department, because at the time they were so small, they weren't even putting people through academy. They were only hiring not just laterals, but out of state laterals, because they couldn't get people, because they're like, why do I want to come there and not do anything, kind of thing. So it was great. Like, I literally worked with officers from all over the country. I mean, from a department in Alaska to LAPD, NYPD, Chicago, and departments around that, and even Tennessee, like all over. And it was great. And I mean, we still talk now. And I just love the vibe of the officers there. It was just, I was 28 and it wasn't enough action for me.
And you're single at the time, right?
So I wasn't single. My now husband, then boyfriend, had just started dating. And I told him, like, as I'm getting like the conditional job offer and everything, I was like, listen, I'm just telling you now, I plan to move before we got together. Okay. We are not at a stage where I would consider staying for you. Okay. I'm just telling you that.
And so he's from Georgia then.
So we met in Georgia. He's actually from the Bay Area also. He's from Oakland, which is hilarious that we're from neighboring cities. And then we found out that we lived in the same city, small California city, like 2 or 3 years apart, directly across the street from each other.
Oh, really? That's really crazy.
And then we meet in Georgia. And so, you know, he's like, well, you know, I know we haven't been dating that long, but, you know, I'm really into you, and I don't want you to get away from me. And then out of my mouth, and I don't know why I said this, because I'm a very planned person. I'm a bit of a late bloomer when it comes to dating and stuff like that. I said, well, you can come with me. And I remember thinking, why did you say that?
You're trying to grab it out of the air. Like, get it back.
But there was like this awkward silence. And if I said anything either way, it was just going to be weird. So I just left it alone. And I'm thinking, like, why did you say that? So we had the conversation. He did end up moving a few weeks after I moved, but I made it very clear to him that we would not be living together. I said, I understand you're moving across country, but I've never lived with a man. I don't need you throwing up in my face all that you gave up to come out here. Like, if you're going to move, we will continue this relationship, but we're still getting to know each other. Because when we moved out here, we'd only been dating like 5 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was roommates with one of my college girlfriends, so that was cool. My husband ended up getting an apartment across town, and that's how we, you know, survived for about, I'd say, 2.5 years of a relationship before he proposed, and we moved in together.
That's good. That's a healthy I guess that's a healthy, what do they call it? That point between
Yeah.
meeting and the dating time, that
Yeah.
a courtship.
Court.
That's a
No,
healthy
and
courtship.
it was very much that. I joke with him often because I told him I didn't want to live with him unless we were married.
Mhm.
And he proposed to me the day that, I mean, I knew we were going to move in together. I knew it was moving in that direction, but he proposed to me the day the house closed. And I
Wow.
always joke with him. I said, you just did that so you would have a place to stay.
I'm just your sugar mama. That's right.
But I mean, it worked. We've been married 10 years now. And
That's
here we are.
that's cool. That's good. Obviously, it's doing something right. So you're in you you work for Paradise Valley, is that correct? Is
Paradise
that-
Valley, yes.
and so
Mhm.
and did you and you've worked there ever since? Was that the second department you worked at? Or did you work at
That was
anything
the
else?
second department, and I was there for only a year and a half
Okay.
before I transferred. I lateraled again to Tempe PD, and Tempe, Arizona, is where Arizona State University is.
Mhm.
And so that department, when I came over, I don't know, they were sitting at about maybe like 350, somewhere in that when I came over in
Oh,
2009.
so they're a very healthy sized department.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And that was cool. The Tempe was what you wanted, huh? Tempe was the
Yeah, overall it was what I wanted. It was just a little different dynamic, I think, because like culturally, policing is different out this way than what I was used
Mhm.
to back in Georgia. Um, because Paradise Valley didn't give me a lot of that because the officers were from so many different places.
Oh,
Tempe was a bit more of a culture shock because just and I've spoken to other people who've said the same thing, people who are from here and have policed here for a long time. The camaraderie is different to me. Like back in Georgia, like we're legit ride or die. Like if you're gonna fire this person, you're gonna fire us all, kind of thing.
oh, they
um
hang together no matter thick or thin, huh?
yeah, yes, we are. Like if you get in trouble, we don't back away. We are there for you. Like there's a group of us, people used to call us the usual suspects because we were together all the time. Like we were together before work. If you get dispatched, two will get dispatched to a call, three or four might show up. We were together outside of work, and we were just that. I mean, we're like that now. I mean, I was just on the phone with one of my really good girlfriends before I got on with you, and
Mm.
we talk constantly. So I just found that to be different. So it took me a minute just to kind of find my groove
Mhm.
in Tempe because I didn't really feel like I belonged anywhere per se. Because I didn't go to academy here. So I
Mhm.
didn't have that. I just did like a post equivalency
Right.
exam
Yeah.
to get certified. And I have a different personality. Like, I'm not aggressive, but I would definitely speak my mind. And if I don't like you, you'll know. Just plain and simple. I'm polite, but if I'm not here for that. So it was just weird to me that camaraderie, like people didn't hang out the same way. And it's funny because now that I'm retired, I hang out with more people from the department than I ever did when I
Yeah.
was working there. So just
Mm.
that cultural thing was just different. And it took me a minute just to kind of wrap my mind around that.
Yeah, and I noticed that. I noticed that I've been I've seen that in various things because I moved around a lot when I was a kid. My
Mhm.
we moved to I went to a lot of different schools and stuff like that, and I noticed I that depending on the area in which the school was or the state, it was there would always be some kind of there's always a difference in culture and people
Mhm.
treated in either whether they and I'm not talking about any kind of racial culture or anything like that. I'm talking about just the way people interacted. Some people
One.
they were close and they wanted to be close, and once you were in the group, you were one of the team, and you were.
Yes.
And then others is like, hey, I know you. Hey, yeah, I know. Remember we spent a whole weekend together. We had to go to a thing and a ball game or something like that. Yeah, I remember that. Well,
Yeah, and that's it.
we're not close friends. I thought we were
Yeah.
close friends. We really bonded on that one.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I
No,
gotta go.
yep.
Weird. Yeah.
And it is, and it just take, and it's interesting, like explaining that to people who hadn't worked anywhere else or they've not experienced that. Like, if you go to Chicago or New York or something, if you tell them that you're on the job or whatever, they'll open up their whole house to you.
Absolutely.
You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Yes.
You can meet them one time and they're like, oh, next time you come to town, I don't care if you come with your family, you stay with me, I'll do this, and so
Yeah.
it's just a different environment. And I've spoken to people who've gone east for a training or something, and they're like, wow, like I had no idea it was like this. I'm like 100%.
Right. I met a guy. We went to I've got family that lives in New York City, and
Mhm.
we were in Manhattan, and we went to this pizza place. It's this little hole in the wall pizza place, and it's what is it? I forget the name of it. Anyways, it's they've got police patches from all over the country, all over this wall
Yep.
in this place, and you go in there, and is it? I'm still thinking of the name. It's Paisano's Perfect Pizza, or something Perfect Pizza.
Mhm.
Anyways, so we go in there, and I'm like, holy cow, this is cool. Yeah, I'm gonna eat here.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
easily the best pizza I've ever had. And I'll tell you,
Yes.
I live on the West Coast, and their worst pizza is 10 times better than what we have over here. That's just a
I
side
hear
thing.
you.
And so I get the pizza, and I'm waiting for my thing. Well, this cop walks in, and he's like, "Hey, I'll have two." He's got a super New Yorkie accent, the whole
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
And they're like, "You want two?" He goes, "Yeah, give me two." They're like, "All right." So they do their thing, and they just hand them to him.
Mhm.
Well, that's cool. That's not a West Coast
Mhm.
thing. We don't get freebies at all.
No,
So
and it's definitely like a difference. And like I remember when I did my background interview for Tempe, and I remember the background sergeant asking me, "Have you ever accepted a bribe or a gift?" And I said, "Well, let's time out because I already know culturally your definition and my definition are different." And so he's like, "Okay, well let's talk about that." I
yeah.
said back home, if and we had a lot of not to say a lot, we had a decent amount of restaurants and some pockets where people from the East Coast had retired and come down and opened up a business. And if
Mhm.
they were from Chicago or New York or New Jersey, like they would get offended if we tried to pay for a meal when we were in uniform. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
we would just leave like a really healthy tip for them
Yeah.
sometimes, or we would get people that would pay for our meals when we were out and stuff like that. And I said, so that was just common practice. Like, you go to Dunkin' Donuts and they would try to give you the whole store. And I'm like, I just wanted some orange juice.
Yeah.
Like, I don't,
Yeah. Oh,
all I
here's the
want,
this, and here's this. And you're like, whoa.
yeah,
Yeah.
all I want is orange juice. Even after I'd moved and I was visiting one time and I went by the old Dunkin' Donuts where, near where I used to patrol, the guy still recognized me. And he was like, "Oh, you didn't have to pay for that, boom, 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 boom. Here you go, kind of thing." And plus, we kind of use it as like a little substation, so it was basically like extra security for
Yeah.
them too.
Yeah. They dig
But
it.
you know, I, I had to tell them here. I said, "Understand this. I understand the mindset behind me being given a meal or a car wash or something like that. Don't think to the extreme that if an employee at this establishment commits a crime, then I'm not going to arrest them or investigate to the fullest of the extent." And I
Right.
said, so they're not worth my job. You know what I mean? I said,
Right.
these little
That
free
soda
donuts
that
and
I got, or that orange juice is
sandwiches,
not.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not worth it. I said, so that was how, they would get us to come and hang out in their parking lots and
Hmm.
stuff like that.
Right.
I give you something free to drink at QT, you report right on the side of the building kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Oh, yeah.
So
It makes it easy.
it's a give and take relationship. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was my kind of my intro to how culturally different things were. And it just
Hmm.
kind of, and then you just kind of make your own. You kind of make your own family
Right. Yeah.
over time.
Yeah. Going back really quick to that pizza place. So that guy, I'm talking to him, and he's waiting for his pizza while they're warming it up, and he jumps the line, and they start working on his order before they work on mine, which was
Mhm.
really cool. And I had no issues with it. But I'm talking with him. I said, "Hey, how you doing, man? Yeah, I'm a cop from back west." And he's like, "You're on the job?" And he's super New Yorkie. And
Right.
I said, "Yeah." He goes, hey, good to me. And he just puts his hands out there, and it was just like
100.
a
Yes.
really strong, like double handshake. And he's like,
Mhm.
"Hey, you need anything?" He gives me his card. A matter of
Yep.
fact, I've got his patch and card still right here. He
Nice.
gives me a patch and a card, and he goes, "Oh man, you take it easy." It's just super friendly,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. The culture is just
It's just
ridiculously different.
100%. And yeah, so that, like I said, you just build your own kind of environment over time and stuff like that. And um, but yeah, I mean, I was there at Tempe for 11 years before I retired.
Mhm. You know,
So
and you say you started in '03, and then you retired in what, 2020? Is that about right?
yes, August of 2020.
And so that's pretty rare to have a 17-year career. Usually it's a little bit longer. And we're going to get
Yeah.
into I want to get into it, why that is in just a second. But I do want to kind of preface it with, when I first met you, I had gone to a conference and I saw you work in that conference, and you were like signing people into classes, or you were checking people in, and you just looked like a person who just worked there. That you were just one of the people that worked there. And you're thinking, all right, but what after I got to know you, I met you and I got to know you, just speaking with you and hearing who you are, I realized you never, ever, ever know who somebody is.
Mhm.
You can't know by looking at them. We get that old adage of you can't judge a book by its cover is absolutely true with every single person on this planet. Because I'm talking with you and I said, "Hey, can I get the sign-in sheet?" And you're like, "There you go. Yeah, it's right there." We're like, "There's no pens here at this table to sign in." And you're like, "I got it." And you went running around doing this whole thing, finding pens, making sure everybody was able to do what they needed. And it was you were bending over backwards for all these people, and you didn't even realize that you have a story to tell that is crazy beyond what you see from the cover of somebody. And as you mentioned it before, and we talked about that whole idea of uh, humility, and you got to be
Mhm.
humble, and you got to be willing to do things for other people. Because I think as we're talking, and as I'm thinking about this portion that I'm talking about right now, and as what you think you said earlier, I see who you were was something that it doesn't matter what your position is. You go do it and you do it right, and you serve other people and you help them.
Mhm.
And you were talking about Major Greer, and
Mhm.
she put you in a position because you were like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to go talk to the counselor. I don't want to be here. And then all of a sudden you get a position and you're like, oh, I've got something to do now. Okay. You get ownership in whatever
Yeah.
it is you're doing. If you have ownership, you're going to take care of that. What do you do when you get a
Mhm.
new car or you get a new whatever? You let's say your car. You go out,
Mhm.
you're washing that car every other day. You're, hey, there's a piece of dust on this car, and but it's yeah, of course there's dust on it. You drove it on the road, but that's the thing, is when you have ownership of something, you take care of it. And I
Yeah.
saw that you had an amazing amount of ownership. And you start realizing, okay, there's more to this person than meets the eye, because yeah, they're doing all these things. They don't just work here. They're more than
Mhm.
just a hired hand who answered an ad in the paper for a minimum wage job to help sign people in at a conference. So there's a little bit more to you. And I wanted to preface this next portion that we're going to talk about with that, because you've talked about being a college kid, a cop who's done a bunch of different things and gone to different departments, and the life that you live, and then retiring it's after 17 years, which isn't overly common. I mean, it does
Mhm.
happen.
Yeah.
And so uh I wanted to make sure that was out there, because we never know who it is that we're meeting. We never know when you've not met somebody before, you're not seen somebody before. Everybody has something to offer that you can learn from,
100%.
and you can either learn from, or you can have speak into your life. And I don't care if it's the tweaker, I don't care if it's the drug addict, the whatever.
Mhm.
Because if nothing else, you can learn that maybe I know what not to do.
True.
So
There's always no, I mean, there's always a lesson to be learned. And my husband, I'm an extrovert, my husband's an introvert, and he laughs. He was like, "You can make friends with a brick wall." He says, "You're the only person I know that can get on an airplane and walk away with two phone numbers. Like,
yeah,
how do you do that?" I
yeah,
said, "Because I like talking to people, and like I'm curious to know how we are similar, how we are different, and how we may have like some degrees of separation." And
yeah,
the world is a lot smaller than we give it credit for. And I will say, doing, since, and we'll get into my story in just a minute, but since everything unfolded, I will say that um there have been opportunities that have come my way that I don't know if they would have come my way otherwise.
Hmm.
And there are things that I see and I pay attention to now that I asked my therapist one time, I said, do you think these opportunities were always there? Or now that I've gone through what I've gone through, I can now see them? Like I couldn't see them before. And now
Right.
I've been put in a different place. So when I tell people like, oh, they're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm retired. And they're like, retired? You look so young. And I was like, oh, thank you. Like,
I'm moving to Florida golfing every day retired, but I'm a retired.
right,
Yeah.
right. And I'm just like, well, one, I'm not technically retired because I have two young kids at home. Okay. And so there's a lot of moving and grooving with that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I retired in August of 2020. It was a medical retirement.
Hmm.
And um, on October 29th, 2018, my partner and I were involved in a shooting. And that day was just kind of interesting because um, I have to kind of like go back a little bit because 9 days prior, an officer at my first department in Georgia had been shot and killed. His name was Officer Antoine Tony. I did not know him, but this really rocked Gwinnett County as a whole. It had been quite some time since anything like that had happened. And I mean, I started getting phone calls that day on the 20th. I mean, male officers, female officers, I mean, in shock, in tears. They didn't know him because you know how bigger departments are. You don't always know everybody,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
it's your department, it's your area. And so, I jumped into Lindsay mode, as I call it, and I just started texting and calling people and seeing if, how are you? And I heard and I think part of it is because I was so far away,
Mhm.
like I wasn't there to take on the same hurt and pain that they were taking on. So I always say I was doing like virtual cutting basically
Okay.
because I was on the phone. I was watching the news article, the news stories. I was reading the articles. I watched the funeral procession. I watched the funeral ceremony, and I'm watching his academy mates like holding each other up in tears as this young man who was 30 years old had just turned 30 3 days before he died.
Oh,
Um, and he's the one who wanted to be a police officer since he was little.
oh,
Like
he's that guy who it didn't
he's
fall
that
in his
guy.
lap. That's all he wanted.
Yes, he made moves. He was born in California. He came out to Georgia. He became a cop. And from what I understand, and from what the community says, people loved him at the department. The community loved him. I've never seen so many people line the freeway
Wow.
for an officer's procession like that. And I'm listening and I'm looking at his picture. Now, I don't know about you, but departments love to change their uniforms. Like when they get a new chief or something, everybody got to put
Mhm.
their stamp on it or a new sheriff or whatever, right?
Right. Right.
Gwinnett County has been wearing the same uniform since before I got there, and I got hired in 2003. Okay, this uniform has not changed.
Mhm.
So when I look at his picture, I've sat in that same position, I've had that same smile, and I wore that same uniform. And I think also not only to see somebody wearing a uniform that you wore, but this was a young black officer, and as I would say young because I'm 42, but a younger, you know, black female officer, I'm looking at him and I see myself in him. And obviously it doesn't matter what color he was, but I really connected with him when I saw that picture.
Right.
And that's a picture I can't get out of my head, even till this day, like seeing him because I'm like that could have been me on the news. That could have been, you
Right.
know. And so
And I think we look at that all the time. I think I don't know. At least I know I do it. I see on LinkedIn or on Instagram or Facebook, whatever, the Officer Down Memorial page, all the stuff like that, or end of watch
mhm,
photos, and you see those, and that could be any one of us at any time,
mhm, mhm,
and you have to be on your toes. And it's so, like you said, you never know. That could be they're in the same position, that they're in a different uniform, different color or whatever, but it's
mhm,
a patch on the sleeve, and
yeah,
they got the flag behind them or whatever, and it could be
yes.
any one of us at any time.
And I think that connection is there too because I don't know. It just kind of it hits different when you see, like you were talking before about how we can compartmentalize when we take people to jail.
Right.
I think we do that to a certain extent, even with the officer down page. We
Mhm.
compartmentalize if it's not our state, if it's not our same color uniform
Yeah.
or something like that, we feel sad, but that same raw connection isn't there as when
Mhm.
you're looking at somebody who's wearing the same patch that you have, like
Right.
that you're going to put on maybe later on in that week. So that really stuck with me. And then, I listened to the last call, and to listen to the last call, somebody had filmed it on their phone, and they're pointing at the radio. But in the background of that video, I see an officer like bawling,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Well, lo and behold, I know that officer. I couldn't see their face, but just from the body mechanics, and I text them and I said, "Was that you in the video?" And they were like, "Yeah, that was me." And that
Mhm.
made me feel even more helpless because I wasn't there to hold that officer. You
Right.
know what I mean? And I
Right.
understand it's not about me, and I can't be everywhere at once, but I've probably said this a million times, but I have very much like the backdraft, the movie Backdraft, like that mentality, like you go, we go kind of
Right.
thing.
Right.
And so, just to be blunt, my attitude is if you're gonna be fucked up, I'm gonna be fucked up with you.
Right.
And so I was trying to meet their level of pain by watching all the things I could from here. And what that ended up doing is taking like a emotional and physical toll on me that I didn't realize was coming
Mhm.
until the Saturday after. I worked Saturday to Tuesday at the time, and I was driving to work. I got off the phone with my mom about something very small regarding my kids, and it just pushed me over the edge. And I like had a hissy fit in my car. I start almost having a panic attack. I'm crying, and even though my mom was the one that kind of pissed me off at that time, she's the first
Mhm.
person I called. Um, and I called her because my husband was asleep. He worked nights at the time, and he was
Mhm.
asleep. And she's like, "You should come home." And I was like, "Well, I'm closer to work than I am home." I end up talking to a sergeant who I really trusted because my sergeant was at a training, and he's like, "You need to go home and spend time with your family," which was rare. Me and my husband, we worked opposite days and opposite um, hours at the
Okay.
time.
Uh-huh.
We barely saw each other. So
Right.
for me to be home and for us to go have breakfast as a family was like a blessing. So by the time I get home, I'm all cried out. I don't want to talk about it. We go have breakfast. Cool. That Sunday didn't feel mentally right to go to work just yet.
Mhm.
I kept an extra day. The sergeant was really cool. He said, "Just take the time that you need. Don't worry about it. And call me if you
Mhm.
need something."
That's good. Yeah.
So that Monday morning, I wake up the 29th, and I was like, okay, I feel like I can go to work today because over the years, and we've all done it in our younger years, we act like we're invincible, nothing bothers us, and that we go to work all the time. Whether we're mentally okay, whether we're physically okay, we go to work. And I just got to the point in my life where I just didn't believe in that anymore. If I need to take a day to just lay down, that's what I'm
Mhm.
going to do. I'm
Right.
just going to lay down because
Right.
I want to be good for me and I want to be good for you. Because if we go through that door together, I need to be 100%. My brain doesn't need to be somewhere else.
Right.
So that was very much the mentality I had at that point.
Right. And I think about that same thing sometimes. Yeah, we were doing it for the more often than not, we do it for the person next to us. That if
Hmm.
you're going through the door, I'm going to go with you, and I'm
Hmm.
not letting you go alone. I don't want you to.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can't handle the survivor's guilt if something bad would happen. And
Right.
Chris Hoyer, who I've had on here, and he
Hmm.
mentioned that same thing. That survivor guilt is just
Yep.
horrible. You just can't handle that, and so I don't want to have to go through that. The other side of it, and this was brought up to me by one of my sergeants years ago. You're doing something, and if you don't put your best into it, what if there's a little kid inside there that's the hostage and they get hurt? And, okay,
Exactly.
that's horrible. Now let's go one step further. What if that little kid is your child? What if that they
Hmm.
had kidnapped your child and that child's in there?
Hmm.
Would you do everything you have and you can to get in there and get that baby
Hmm.
out of there? You
Hmm.
absolutely would. So we have to think of that. If there are citizens, there are people, there are tribe. They depend on us. And so that's another reason we have to go do what we go do.
Well, that part, and even before we get to that crazy call, we have to make sure we are mentally okay to
Hmm.
be there fully too, to make all the right decisions. Because subconsciously, when we're going through things at home, we don't realize how that shows and how it reflects at work,
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
because we've been sitting with it for so long. So and the reason why I kind of had that mental wherewithal is because the year prior, I had dealt with postpartum depression after I had my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I had taken steps between the help of my husband, my mom, and my extended family and friends to get better. So I was in a good place mentally when my critical incident happened. So I was seeing a therapist. I was eating better, sleeping better. I was in a place of telling people like, hey, I see a therapist. You should too.
Right.
I don't feel good today. If you don't feel good, let's talk about it. And so I was just in a much different space. And so I knew enough about myself to be like, you know what, you need to take a step back. So I didn't go to work for 2 days, get up that Monday. I go into work. I worked 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the time. And one of my friends who was on light duty, she saw me in the hallway and she says, hey, I know you haven't been at work for the last couple of days. Is everything okay? Now we ask people, we don't say that to each other in
Right.
first responder world
Mhm.
nearly as much as we should,
I
right?
agree with you 100%. Absolutely. You're
We will
absolutely right.
I will walk past you in the hallway at the precinct or at the station. And I say, hey, Ken, how you doing? Over my shoulder. And I keep walking. I'm not stopping. I'm not turning towards you. I'm not looking in your face to show
Mhm.
you that my body language is ready to receive your answer.
Right.
She said that to me and she leaned up against the wall. And I was like, okay.
And so
And
she's staying
so,
there. She's waiting to hear from you.
yes,
She's putting time into
yes,
this.
100%.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I just, blah. I told her what was going on because only one other person at work knew what was going on with me, which I'd been dealing with that week before. Told her about the officer. I told her it wasn't fair that this had happened to Officer Tony. And, he didn't get a second chance. And we know plenty of people who aren't the best people in the world that will get chance after chance. And I didn't understand why. It was that why.
Right.
And, and I said, he was so well liked. I wish I had gotten a chance to know him. And I said, I fell into police work. This wasn't my dream job. This wasn't what I wanted to do first, but this is what he wanted to do first. And he doesn't get a second chance. So I was very angry. And then I jinxed myself, I feel now, by saying, I've been dodging the proverbial bullet for 15 years, is what I said. Okay. That's what I said. And I have that conversation with her. I go out to my day. Now, I often, whenever I tell that story, I thank her for that. And me and her, we still speak now because I've told her I think that conversation quite possibly saved my life. I say because I was able to vent, I was able to get it out
Yeah.
before I hit the road that day. And so fast forward 6 hours. We get dispatched. My partner got dispatched to handle a call at our headquarters. It was a domestic violence call. This was a Monday. The domestic violence happened sometime like Friday, Saturday. And she took the report, but while she's taking the report, she finds out that there's an order of protection that had gone out to the street too, pertaining to this call. Another officer already had it. He had tried to serve it a couple of times with no success. Nobody answered. So once he saw she had picked up the report portion of it, um, she's like, hey, let's go. Why don't you go grab the order from him and we'll go serve it. So I was like, okay, no big deal, right? Like we've
Right.
done that before. And we we knew he was home or assumed he was home because I guess he'd seen the other officer come to the house
Mhm.
already. He
Mhm.
just wasn't answering. And he texted her about it. So now he's pissed because she didn't go to work like she said, and she's gone to the police. He now knows. And but it wasn't anything we hadn't done before. It wasn't anything like out of the ordinary. From what I remember, the paperwork wasn't crazy. I always say though, I wish that some states would share information a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree.
Um, then maybe we would have had a different response. But we're there. So she has standing. She can let us into the house. She does so. We enter the house. He starts walking up the hallway. My partner talks to him and says, "Hey, this is why we're here. We need to talk to you." And she told him to take his hands out of his pockets. And when he took his hand out of his pocket, he came out with a 6-shot revolver and started firing at us.
Mhm.
We're probably between like 12 to 15 feet apart, somewhere in there. But he's a taller gentleman. Once that arm extends, that closes that gap.
And you say that
you know.
politely, gentlemen. Got it.
Well, you know what I mean.
It's not very gentlemanly to pull out a revolver and start shooting at people. But
100%. I agree with you. And so when the first shot went off, because my partner was standing to my left, she's a little shorter than me, and I honestly thought she got shot in the face. And things were unraveling so quickly, I didn't have time to look back to my left before I started drawing with my right hand and stepping to the side to move because he was coming at me. And I got shot in my right forearm as I was drawing. So I never got my gun all the way up and out, like to present it towards him, because he was right there at that time. So the girlfriend runs out of the door. I run out of the door behind her. He's right behind me. And I don't know, because this happened in under 5 seconds. So I don't know in which order some of these shots happened in, but I did get shot in my upper left arm as I was running out the door. I don't remember that. I didn't feel it. So possibly because of adrenaline. I joke that I was heavier then. So, I call it my mama insulation kind of helped me that day, my fat in my arm, so I didn't feel it. It was a through and through. And he attempted to shoot back at my partner. He hit the house. My partner returned fire. She struck him one time. She shot once. She struck him once, which to me, she's a rock star and a badass for that. And he also shot me in my back. I got shot in the back of my vest. I don't know if it was sympathetic reflex when she shot him, because she said he was like 2 steps behind me. I don't know the sequence, but that's what happened. It was right over my kidney, so it knocked my legs out from under me. I fell down in the gravel because we were like in a driveway area to the right, and he ran to the left. He has one more bullet left in his gun, because I got 3. The door jam got 1. My partner got 1. He hopped over in somebody's backyard and he killed himself. Yeah. So when I do a presentation about my critical incident, and when I do it, that portion is drawn out a lot more. But I tell people that happened in under 5 seconds, like from the first shot to the last shot outside.
Wow.
And so
you didn't get any rounds off. Your partner got 1, or did she get more than?
Nope, she got 1, and she struck him. She struck him.
Where do you know where?
If I recall, he got hit in the left side of in the left side, because I think he kind of exited the house at an angle. So if you can imagine like a door, you know what I mean. So he kind of canted his body a little. So I believe he got hit in the left side of his chest. It came out the front of his chest, and with the arm he had outreached to shoot me, which I'm glad he didn't come any higher. He that same bullet left his body and went into his right forearm.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of weird. I just thought about that. I got shot in the right forearm, and so did he.
Huh.
Which is kind of weird. So
yeah, but she played connect the dots. Through his left side and threw him, and then
yeah, we don't hear that often, and I always like to praise her for that, because that's awesome.
Yeah, that's a good shot.
Yeah. So and I tell her too, like, you quite possibly, you saved my life. And she's like, well, I thought I shot you. And I was like, even if you had, we would still be friends.
It's right.
So, and that's kind of where that happened. And, my partner says I went down, but I popped back up. But in my mind, I was down on the ground for at least 30 seconds. But you can tell from my body camera, because my body camera came off my chest when I hit the ground, and I go down and I do pop right back up. But I'm like, how is that? Because I had 3 very distinct thoughts that went through my head. And I was like, I had to have been down there for at least 30 seconds. Like, how did I go down and come back up when the first thought was, oh shit, I'm paralyzed, because I couldn't feel my legs for a second. And did I poop on myself? That was my other reaction too. Just to be honest. And then it was, well, where is he? Because I don't want to look over my shoulder and get shot in the face. And then my third thought was my family. I had a 22-month-old and a 4-year-old at home. And they pop in my head everything I learned at Gwinnett County's Academy of you go home. You will go home that day. You stay in the fight. Like, all that came rushing to me. I popped up. I run down a couple houses to get behind a tree. I'm like, well, I know my partner, she's a badass in my eyes. So I'm quite sure she's running after him. I'm trying to grab my radio, you know how it is, you get in a fight and your mic comes off and it's swinging and you're trying to grab it. Like
Yes.
that's happening, but there's blood on my hand and I'm looking at my arm and I'm like, well, that's broken. That's a problem.
And you're not feeling pain necessarily. You're just seeing all this weird stuff, right?
At that point, I wasn't feeling pain. The pain didn't
Adrenaline was.
come until a few minutes later. And then there was a pucker factor because, training kicks in. I put my hurt arm across my chest. I reach across with my support hand to grab my gun, and there's no gun. So I'm like, shit, I must have dropped my gun in the house. And I was doing I wish my body camera had stayed on because I was doing this weird little dance back and forth. And things were still muffled. So I kind of remember hearing my partner on the radio. I kind of don't. And what I do remember, it's because I've heard the radio traffic. And I'm like, do I go back in the house or do I stay out here? Do I go? So I was back and forth. And if I had just looked down a little bit, I would have seen my gun in the gravel where I fell after I got shot in the back.
Oh.
But I just knew I dropped it in the house. And what and my partner was still in the house because we all ran past her. We were like in like a U-shaped kind of kitchen. And so she was in the bottom of the U. So everybody ran past her and trying to get me on the radio to find out where he was. She's like, well, I don't want to pop out this door. And he's right here. And so there's just, like I said, there's things I don't remember and things were muffled. So there's some things I didn't hear on the radio. And then an officer probably got to us within 90 seconds of her putting that on the radio, just because of the street we were on. It was a double squad day. So we had a lot of officers in the area, and there was an officer sitting right up at the corner at the 7-Eleven in the parking lot.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and that's when the pain kicked in, is once that first officer got there.
When you start seeing, people coming in to come to your aid, to back you up and support you, you're like, okay, I can let my guard down a little bit. Probably a little bit of mental block that just comes in there and tries to do everything it can to make sure you're good. And then once you know you're safe, okay, I can come back to myself and then realize, oh crap, it hurts.
Well, and it's like that lizard brain kicks in. So you're like in survival mode. You got your blood leaving your extremities, going to your heart to pump, and your vision is narrowing, your hearing, like all that stuff, like all the stuff they talk about, like when they talk about all that stuff happened, like the muffling and everything else. And I'm like, okay, and the sirens kind of helped bring me back a little bit, but then it was the thing setting in of, oh shit, I just got shot. And I'm trying to tell the first officer there, like, I remember looking him in his eyes because it didn't seem real unless we connected eyeballs. And I was like, dude, he took out a fucking gun and shot me. And so he's like, yeah, okay, well, let me check you. But I just keep moving my body and he's trying to check me head to toe. And I keep moving like, no, you don't understand. Like he shot me, like for real. And so he's like, okay. And I thought I had a gaping hole in my back because of how badly it hurt. And he's like, you don't have a hole. And I said, no, maybe the bullet tracked somewhere else. Like you have to look. He's like, you don't. And so I was like a kid, when your kid keeps giving you the wrong arm when you're trying to put a jacket on him, like that was me. I kept turning every direction he didn't want me to be. And
your vest, it was your vest that stopped it, correct? Your vest stopped the round.
Yeah. I got hit at the most bottom part of the Kevlar you can get hit. Like when I got my stuff out of evidence, and they opened up the panel where the Kevlar actually sits in. There's almost like this masking tape that they put at the bottom of
just
the
to keep everything
Kevlar.
together.
That's where I got hit. I got hit in the tape. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but it hurt like a bitch. I'm gonna tell you that. Like it felt like I got kicked by a horse in my back. So
but it was just bruised and swollen for days, huh?
Oh yeah, that area of my back was purple for quite some time. And I'm just surprised, like, nothing got broken. And again, I should stop blaming my kids for my extra weight. I think my mama insulation helped me that day because, I had a little bit more padding back there. My partner's a little petite and, if she'd gotten hit in that same place, she definitely would have broken some ribs. Through her vest, she would have broken some ribs for sure.
Right. So he does this whole check. He's finding out you're good. You're not, you don't have a gaping hole in your back. You
Right.
maybe get one in your shoulder. It's not gaping, but there's a hole there. And then
Right.
there's the one in your forearm, because he's just checking.
Mhm.
He's checking for all the injuries so he can pass this word and make sure you're okay and keep you
Right.
alive and address what he needs
Right.
to.
Mhm.
Right.
Yep.
And
And
so
it
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, and then, my another one of my zone partners got there. He's a army guy, and he carries like extra tourniquets. So I had a tourniquet on my left arm and a tourniquet on my right arm.
Mhm.
So he was ready, and he threw me in his patrol car and took me down the street to the staging area.
And once you got there, did you ever go unconscious or anything like that? Or did you stay awake the whole time and you have to go into surgery or?
I was getting to that point because, the further away we got from the scene, the more the pain was kicking in. I think, like you said, like that safety that I can kind of come back to reality, and, I'm safe because other people are here to take care of me now.
Mhm.
And everything started to hurt. And I'm like, I'm cursing, I'm apologizing, I'm cursing. I'm telling my squad mate, like, my mom's gonna make me quit my job. Like, I just got off the phone with her. This is not gonna work. And I didn't want to go anywhere until I knew my partner was okay also. And it was funny because I'm trying to like manage my pain. And I did a technique which is called hypnobirthing. That's what I used when I was in labor with my daughter. And it's like a form of almost like meditation, basically. And you're using your body's own hormones to manage your pain, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And you kind of zone out basically. And you some people listen to affirmations, some people picture things, but it's a practice. So you have to practice it to get good at it. And I used it in labor. I was successful in having an unmedicated labor. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So again, muscle memory, right? The same way I was drawing and stepping to the right, I put my arm across my chest and went to draw my weapon with my support hand. Muscle memory kicks in. So now I'm trying to mitigate pain by using these relaxations that I had used just the year before. And it worked for short periods of time, but obviously when you're in labor, you're not in the back of a patrol car. There's not sirens. There aren't people with helmets and shield and rifles running down the street. It
Right.
should be a little bit more serene, right?
Right.
And I remember, like, when is the ambulance getting here? I remember saying something to that effect. And I said, I feel like I'm about to pass out. And I said, this hurts so bad. Like, my arm at this point is on fire. And I think it was like, once you look at it, because it was a through and through, it broke my radius bone.
Oh wow.
And right, I've never broken a bone before, but as soon as I looked at my arm, I was like, well, that shit's broken. Like, you know,
I'm not using that today.
that's crazy. And as fire was getting there, and it's so weird to have a crew respond to you that you're used to going on calls with.
Mhm.
And now the captain's looking you in your face like, oh shit, she's a patient now. She's
Right.
not, you know what I mean? My
Yeah.
partner in crime, so to speak, on this call. So he jumps into action. And I was 2 seconds from passing out because they were gonna have me sit in a chair. And then the gurney got there. And I was like, okay, cool. So now we're here. I said, but I don't want to go anywhere until I see my partner. A supervisor truck comes screaming into the parking lot. He jumps out, opens the back door. She jumps out. Me and her lock eyes, like, are you good? Yeah, I'm good. I see her holding her left arm. She gets on a gurney, and I'm like, okay, you guys can take me at this point. Um, I was begging for pain meds, like, immediately.
Some morphine.
Yep. And I
Yeah.
hate morphine. I've had it one time and I hate it, but I said, please give me what you have. And they're like, well, we got to check vitals. I'm like, forget vitals. My blood pressure is going to be high because I'm in pain. Just give it to me. And then I found out, I was like, oh shit, I don't have my phone on me because I hated having my work phone on me because I'm like, I don't want them to get in touch with me like that at work.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I would always leave it in my duty bag. And I normally had my personal phone, but for some reason it was opposite this day. And when they're cutting stuff off, a phone falls out, and I was like, "Oh shit, that's my phone." So I grab it. Now, the person who was begging for pain meds has now halted getting vitals because I need to make a phone call.
Gotta make a phone call. Hang on a second. I gotta do some stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, so just give me a second. So with my good arm, I reach up, I unlock it. I know my husband's number by heart. Ask him if he knows mine by heart, but I will get over it. It is fine. We've been together 14 years. I'll get over it, I swear. So I call him, but he didn't answer because he worked night, so he was asleep. So I had to call him again. He answers, and I have to like I need you to wake up like right now because I had to tell you something. He's like, okay. And I said, I'm okay, but I just got shot 3 times. And this is the hospital I'm going to. I need you to get up. I need you to get to the hospital right now. And there's like this pause because I know his brain is like, I'm sorry, what? What just happened?
And did you say what I think you said? Yeah.
Right. Well, it's a weird thing. If you've ever had to call somebody, a loved one after a critical incident, and as the phone is ringing, you're like, okay, we talk about making these phone calls, but what do you say?
Right. I've thought I've thought about
Yeah.
that. And I've had to make it because I've been in a shooting. And I remember one time we had an officer involved shooting at our department, and they were calling people in because when something like that happens, we need bodies because we have
All
people
hands on deck.
investigating, but we need people to handle the rest of the city or the rest of the county or whatever. So I got called in, and the caller says, "Hey, there's been an officer involved shooting. We need you to come in." I get that. That's cool. It's very unfortunate. Is everybody okay? I need you to start with this. I need you to start with letting me know that my people are okay.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh yeah. No officers were injured. Okay, good. Okay, I'll be in 20 minutes.
Yes, I kind of need that.
I need that first.
It completes the puzzle in a way, and I'm such a, I don't know. I just like to make sure that everyone else is comforted and okay. So I think I was doing that a lot in those first few hours when I would contact people via phone, and I'm like, I'm okay, and are you okay? And who's with you? So I was doing a lot of that. But my husband, he doesn't wake up as quickly as I do. So I can't even imagine being asleep and then getting that type of phone call.
Right.
And the other thing is my husband's not in law enforcement. And so I tell people, I said, I'm very lucky to have a husband who is secure enough in himself that my job never caused any problems with our relationship. I dated a couple people before him who had an issue with what I did for a living. And I'm like, well, I don't like you enough to quit. So I can't help you with that. That's a you issue, not me.
Right.
And, my husband was great because we actually met on the job. He was the loss prevention guy at Target where I worked, and I used to arrest the shoplifters all the time.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Ladies, you can find anything at Target, or men too. You can find anything at Target, even a significant other. I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh, but you're saying ladies, you find anything at Target, you can find men too.
I mean, you can. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like you can find a relationship at Target if you're looking. And I wasn't looking. It happened. And so he was comfortable with what I did. He was comfortable with the people I worked with. And he's a caveman. And when I say my husband's a caveman, I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean in just a very basic, primal, I want to protect and provide type of way. And so, I wanted to reassure him that I was okay so that, I knew the caveman was going to be activated, but he also knew that there wasn't anything he had to fight, although he wanted to. Trust me, he wanted to, but there wasn't anything that he had to fight at that moment. He just needed to be there to support me.
Right.
And so I called him. He jumps in action. And when we do our presentation, he talks about jumping into caveman mode and completing the mission. That's what he calls it. Like cavemen want to complete the mission because they deal in the present. He jumped into, I got to go get my kid from school, take him to our friend's house and get to Lindsay. That was his thing. And, he was fine up until he dropped my son off at our friend's house. And then obviously he's in panic mode as well. I called my brother, and I love my brother. He's my younger brother. And he's like, he's a realtor, but he doesn't golf in his off time like some realtors do here. He likes to go shooting. So you would think he was the police officer because of his arsenal, right? He has a little bit of everything. So when he gets out of town clients from states that don't have the same type of gun laws we have here in Arizona, they're like, after we go look at these houses, can we go shooting? So that's their thing, right? So his first response to me was, after I give the spiel, is, who shot you? And I said, does it matter? Like, did you hear what I said?
What are you going to do if you find out? What honestly,
Right. And that's what I said. And he told me later, because we have another brother who lives in Tennessee, and he's like, don't worry about that. Like, we had a plan kind of thing. Right. And so he's like, did you call your mother? Now we have the same mother. We just say your mother, right?
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm the oldest. I'm pulling rank. You do it. Click. Okay. So now I'm all yours, EMTs. I'm all yours. So they start cutting stuff off and, pain meds and all that other stuff like that. We get to the hospital. That's a bit of a frenzy. There were a lot of officers there, not just from my department, but from surrounding departments. And so that was neat to see that type of support. And then my family starts to come in, and I remember like my husband had this look on his face, like of fear, and then it immediately went away. And I asked him later, like, what was that about? And he says, well, I didn't know what I was going to walk into. I remember the phone call, but I didn't know what I was going to walk into. And you walk in and you see all these police officers. It's like a movie, right? Standing there. I don't know what to expect when I come around the corner. And he was like, I saw you and you were laughing and you were kind of being bossy, and I knew you were okay.
Yeah.
And I
When
was
you're
like,
being your normal self, we're okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I had a lot of pain meds too. So let's throw that out there, you know? So, and then, then more family starts to get there. Friends start to get there. I'm getting calls from my first apartment in Georgia. People from Paradise Valley start to show up. And there was just a lot of support immediately. And that's the thing I love to point out, is because from the time the shooting happened until even today, I've had really, really great support, starting with my inner circle and then going out from there. Um, and then, now it's time to come home from the hospital, and I have to be mom. I'm not saying my kids didn't care, but they didn't care. Yeah, so what? You're in a cast and your back hurts. You got bandages on your other arm. I need a snack.
Yeah. Well, they're 4 years old, 4 and a year and a half or
And
whatever you said,
and
right?
and yeah, in 22 months. And then, and the other thing was I was still nursing my daughter. So you know what she wanted. So she
Yeah.
she didn't she didn't care about that cash.
Because they don't know. They don't know. And they don't
Yeah.
see the gravity of it. They don't see the big picture. They just, oh, mom
Mhm.
has a Band-Aid on, or whatever.
Yeah.
I've had a
And
Band-Aid.
they need their needs met, and I
Yeah.
get it. They're very much, but my son has been here before, as we say in the South, because he's very intuitive,
Mhm.
and he figured out a lot about what happened before I was ready for him to, because we made sure not to talk about it around him. It
Right.
was mommy got in a fight and she broke her arm. He figured it out quickly when he saw my left arm. When he was helping me change my bandages, he said he wanted to be my doctor. So I said, cool. And he's like, are you sure the bad guy didn't just shoot you? And I was like, what are you saying to me?
I
So
don't know how to answer this question. Yeah.
yeah, it's like that. Where do babies come from? And parents are like, what?
Uh,
Like,
yeah.
I have easily answered that question better than I did that question that day about me
Yeah.
getting
You
shot.
much rather have the baby question. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, we did take some time. We did tell him, we were very open with him about it. He had a couple questions, but kids at that age, their cognitive understanding changes so quickly. So we got more detailed questions over time. And I would just simply answer them and move on.
Mhm.
But then when I returned back to work, I was out for 8 months on light duty, and I went back on industrial leave, and then I went back on light duty after 8 months. That's when his anxiety and worry started to kick in,
Your
which
husband's or your
no, my
son's?
son, my
Okay.
son.
Mhm.
And so it's weird to see that on such a young child, because I wasn't really prepared for that either.
Right. It's weird when
Um,
you said that. And I was like,
mhm.
that's why I asked the question, because
No,
that's not something that you think about with a young child.
100%. And we don't give kids credit for what they understand and how they understand.
Right. I think, yeah.
And he was worried I was going to go back to work and I was going to get shot again. That was his worry. And he was so worried, he was telling everybody else that but me. So I'm finding out for other people what these anxiety symptoms are from my 4-year-old, which I'm like feeling like the worst parent ever, because I'm like, I'm in the house with him and I didn't see these things. And was it because I was dealing with so much, or I thought it presented one way, but it was really presented another way? But
Mhm.
I'm very fortunate to have people in our lives that he trusts and that he felt like he was safe to talk to about that. Like my mom, one of his teachers at school, addressed me about some of his behaviors that I just, he was sneaking my uniform shirt to school with him, to preschool, and like falling asleep in like random places in the classroom at odd times, like outside of their nap time.
Oh yeah, that is a
You
kind
know,
of a cry out. That is kind of
yeah,
obviously a
you
different
know,
behavior.
he wasn't eating and he loves to eat. he
Good
he's
man.
very
Good man.
yes. He's very like, if anybody knows anything about like love languages, his love language is touch. He loves to
Okay.
hug, he loves to be close to people. He wasn't doing any of those things. He's very helpful in the classroom. He loved being like a class helper. Teacher said he can care less. And she was like, that's just wasn't his nature. And then he told her one day that his stomach hurt when he thought about me. And I
Hmm,
was just like, what? So now,
that's
like as a
weird.
parent, like your job is to protect your kid and shelter your kid and to right all the wrongs. And, you know, honestly, until that point, I wasn't angry about my shooting until then.
Right.
Like,
Because once you start seeing affecting your children or those you love, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Because
it's different.
you can do all the crap you want to me. It's when you
Mhm.
start affecting my babies or my family or
Yeah,
those
because
in my circle. Yeah.
he didn't ask for that. And even like the adults in my circle, like, my poor mom and brother, like that took them back to when my dad was shot and killed. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
right.
So
Yeah.
like everybody's on this spiral, but we've provided this very safe, loving, supportive, and I'd say sheltered world to a certain extent for our kids. And then somebody who will never meet my children rocks that, right?
Right.
And that's when the anger came in. Because like earlier when you said I referred to the suspect as a gentleman, and people would say to me like, and I don't mean like a gentleman, I was just, meaning like male, but
Sure. No, I get what you're saying.
people, no, and they're like, well, are you angry? Do you hate the guy that shot you? And I've always said no. I said I wasn't angry until my kid got involved. But even still, I always felt like the best way I could describe it is it was unfortunate that he felt like that was his only way out.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
I don't have any hate towards him like that. Um, and at the same time, like I'm a bit of an empath, so I I feel for any and everybody. But I thought too, like he has a family.
Yeah.
His parents sent well wishes to my partner and I, which I thought was nice and it was unexpected. And they have to deal with the fact that not only was their son, he was a criminal, he had a lengthy record, but he was beating on a woman. That's probably not the first woman he's beaten on.
Right.
And in front of her child, and she had the girlfriend had a brother who was like her daughter's age, and in front of her younger brother, you know, and not only did he, shoot two police officers, my chief at the time, when she did the press conference, she says not only did two female officers get shot, but two mothers got shot. And I think that hit people real different when she said that in that press conference. Because when we hear shooting, what do you automatically think of when you hear that a police officer has been shot in the line of duty?
No, it was it's just a police officer, a guy, even,
Yes,
a guy
generally
cop.
a white male officer is right what we think of. But even with that, nobody ever says a father. Like maybe if people said stuff like that, that would hit home a little differently. Like a
Right.
father was shot today. And I know we always say survived by, but when you say like a father, and so like even when people talk about it now, they're like, man, I saw that press conference. And when she said two mothers got shot, they said that just it was like a hit in the stomach. And so they have to deal with that. Like,
Right, right. And that's exactly the reason I kind of brought up that thing in the intro, the beginning of this, when I said if I said that just a girl who worked at Nordstrom's,
mhm,
she got shot or the roof collapsed on her, everybody would be, oh my gosh, just some girl, she's just trying to make a living, she's just doing minimum
mhm,
wage and trying
mhm,
to work her way through college or whatever. That's what you think about.
yeah.
Once you put it in perspective that even cops are humans and we do everything that every other human does. We breathe, we bleed, we have children, we love, we go through all the various things of emotion, whatever.
Mhm.
You start putting in perspective that everybody is everybody, and that it could have easily been you in that position had you decided to take a left instead of a right when
100%.
you were 17 or whatever. It
Mhm.
makes no difference.
Yeah, and and then he kills himself. So now they have to deal with the loss of a child.
Right.
I feel the same way to a certain extent about, the person responsible for my dad's death, in that they have a family too, and they have to deal with what their family member did. I'm not saying I don't want justice. I'm not saying they don't deserve to be in jail. I'm not saying any of that. But what I'm saying is somebody else is suffering too. And so, not to give anybody an excuse in any way, shape, or form, but that's just kind of where my head was at that time about all of this. And like I said, you bring my kid in it, now I want to choke somebody, because he didn't ask for this.
Right.
And we've dealt with some things, over the years, and we just talk about it very plainly. He knows, that I'm retired now. I'm medically retired because my arm didn't heal the way it needed to come back to work. I could have fought that if I wanted to, but I had to remind myself at what cost, because I don't have anything to prove to anybody but myself and my family. And when I think about, like, it hit me hard when my doctor told me that, and it took the wind out of me for a minute. And I knew it was coming, but when you hear it, it's different. And he was very, he was very caring and supportive about it. He let me sit there for a minute, and I said, well, let me let this sink in. And then I will get back to you, because I'm thinking about, like, as I'm driving away from that appointment and I'm going back to work, I'm thinking about, like, we say we get in a fight at work, and a lot of times we don't mean like knockdown, drag out fights. It's just somebody resisting you, right? And you're just trying to gain control, right? When I think about some of those, like, smaller tussles, I would say that I've gotten into in my career, if I did that with the way my arm is now, my arm would be toast.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
My kids can touch my arm in a certain way, and I want to go through the roof. And it's been 3.5 years.
Really? Wow.
And I said, so I lost like 40% of, like, the extensor muscle in my right hand. So, like, if people were viewing us right now, like, my hand went from, like, I couldn't separate my fingers, so it looked like a mannequin hand, to now I can move it a little bit better. So when I wave, it looks like I'm giving you, like, the okay sign, or like a peacock almost. That's what it looks like. So, I can't, there's certain things I just can't do. And I don't want to try to prove something to other people to the point where I get myself in a crappy situation, or you in a crappy situation, or a citizen, because I felt like I had to be back here, because for me, where I need to be, my most important role in place is being a wife and a mother.
Absolutely.
Because, they can't get me back. I can get another job, I can do other things, but they can't get another me.
Right. And I was talking with some guys this morning, and a very similar topic had come up in regards to our life. It doesn't matter if you're the president of the United States, or the king of the world, or a janitor at a sewage treatment plant. It doesn't matter. You're not going to take anything with you. What you wear does not define you. And when you die, we're all going to die. When you die, it's how you did what you were given with. That's going to be that's going to be your thing. And if you're given these trials and you overcome them, and you have children and you raise them the best, and they grow up, even if they grow up to be janitors, if they're honest and they're solid and they're loving and they care about other people and they do what God's put them on this planet to do, then you've done your job and you did it to the best of your ability. And I think that's
100%.
I think you're
That's
exactly
how you pass on, like, your legacy to people. I mean, it's funny you keep saying janitor. My grandfather was a janitor. He worked at Howard University, because back then, if you were an employee, like, your kids could go to school for free. And he saw that my mom was kind of the brainy one, and my mom got to go to a college for free that would have cost my grandparents a decent amount of money back then.
Right.
And and he did that, but he instilled, like, a certain work ethic, and he also instilled that don't let anybody fuck with you mentality into me as well. That's why he died. I want to say he would have turned 92 the year he passed away. And he told me one time, he says, you know why I've lived as long as I have, Lindsay? And I said, do tell, granddaddy, do tell. And he says, because I don't allow people to fuck with me. When you allow people to fuck with you, you get old and you get stressed. I don't allow people to do that. If I don't like you, I'm going to tell you I don't like you. That way you don't bother me. I don't have to be stressed if you're around me. And also, if you're going to do something, do it to the best of your ability. My grandfather was definitely that person for me, and I was very close with him. even before my dad died, but even more so after my dad died. And so that's where I learned, I don't care top or bottom, you treat people the same, because we all have a part in life. We all have a part in your organization, and we need everybody for it to run smoothly. And you don't walk past somebody in the hallway. Y'all get your check signed by the same damn office. You look them in the face and you speak to them that, oh, well, okay. You be mean to a dispatcher and see how crappy your damn day can go. Exactly. Be shitty to an administrative assistant and watch your damn overtime slip get put on the bottom of the list. Like, don't be a dick. Like, that's always my thing. Like, don't be a dick. Treat people kindly. And that's even for people out on the street. And I was just having a conversation the other day with a former coworker. And I said, what we see in the news and some of these bad apples, as people want to call them and stuff like that, I don't think a lot of these people started out being an asshole. Some of them were, and there's certain things you can't fix in a personality. Like, I think in our profession, like, there are some people that are naturally like good with the public, good with people, right?
Yes.
That's a skill I feel like you can hone. I don't think you can teach that to people. You have to have that already.
Correct.
And I said, but also there are some people who slip through the cracks after critical incidents, after cumulative stress, after things in their personal life, and their departments failed them by not getting them the proper amount of help and support. Right. And, we have a bad habit in our industry of inviting people into our house, fucking them up, and not giving them the tools to unfuck themselves.
Correct. No, I agree with you 100%, because we go through a bunch of junk, whether it is, everyday work stuff or major incidents, whatever the case may be, or even this whole stupid COVID thing. We go through all this different stuff. And I've mentioned this before. I've talked to several other people. And the idea is that we have to build those relationships with people, and that relationship with whether it's that relationship with the janitor or with your partner who you're going on a call with, or if it's with the chief, or if it's, with your spouse or your kids, the records clerk, the dispatcher, or God, whatever you built that relationship with, you need to, you have to do that, because then when times do get tough, and we all get those tough times, somebody needs to be able to sit back, just like that girl did. And she stopped and she leaned on that wall and said, "What's going on? You okay?" Okay, here we go. Because she had a relationship with you. She knew who you were. And we need to do that. We need to be able to reach out to somebody like, "How are you doing?"
Oh, so, oh my goodness. So listen, not to cut you off, but you were like speaking my language right now, because I say this a lot, like, like being in like the peer support world and, and stuff like that. And even with podcasting, and people post, and, there's like the suicide prevention stuff, and mental health and wellness is a popular topic, more so nowadays than it has ever been before in law enforcement. And this is a great sentiment, but it's also becoming a pet peeve of mine. So, just let me go back. If I ever ask you how you're doing and you say you're living the dream, I'll throat punch you, because I hate that statement. And if you tell me I'm fine, I'll also tell you you're lying, because a buddy of mine told me, and I've heard this at other trainings, fine stands for fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So don't tell me you're fine. I need more than that.
The third one that I don't like is peachy. How you doing?
Yeah, I don't like that either. So, so when we're talking to people, like, we really, really need to talk to them and have that conversation.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And ask the question. So when I see these posts and I hear people say, if you're going through something, reach out, right? Reach out is starting to get on my nerves. And I'm not trying to slight it. And I think it's a very important statement. We need to reach in. Like, we have to do a better job of reaching in, because some of us has been there at some point in time. And just due to our personality and the nature of the job and the environment and the culture, we're not always in the place to reach out. And sometimes reaching out seems like a weakness, and it's not. I feel like if you reach out, you are much stronger than you think you are, because it takes a lot. It takes a lot to say, "Ken, I need to talk to you. I'm fucked up right now." Right. And we all know, if you and I worked together and you came in and you didn't greet me the way you normally do, okay, something's going on with Ken. I don't have to call you out and brief in a roll call. I can just wait until we're in the hallway or we go out to the parking lot and say, hey man, like, what's up? Like, you didn't have the same energy you normally have. You weren't talking about the things you normally talk about. Like,
Right.
and
You doing okay?
the same way my friend Amy did and asked me that question, you'll hear everything from, oh, I'm good. Like, I just didn't sleep good last night, or I got this report, like the sergeant's on my ass. I got to get this in today.
Yeah.
Or my fucking life is falling apart. Like, I've asked that question before, man. I've been in the same place for 30 minutes listening to somebody tell me how shit is just shit for them at that point.
Right.
So sometimes we're waiting on someone to ask, almost like going back to my postpartum depression. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what. I chalked it off on being a working mom of 2 kids, and just figuring out life. And, I have a very supportive husband. So that wasn't an issue, but he saw something. My mom saw something. They had a conversation. He very bravely came to me and said, hey,
hey,
I love
baby,
you,
I love you so much.
but something's wrong.
What's going on?
And I'm very grateful to him and my mom and whoever else he had a conversation with, because that's a very touchy subject. And I understand where men, or someone close to you kind of backs off of that conversation. But I was relieved. Like, I was relieved when he said that, because I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, somebody is noticing, like, I needed that. So I was waiting almost. It was a relief. I didn't feel defensive, but it was a relief. So I think the same thing with us when we're going through things. And, I do peer support now. I volunteer and I do peer support now for first responders. And you'll hear great stories, you'll hear bad stories. And the fact that 1 minute we'll go through the door, we'll take a bullet for each other. And the minute you get into some shit and your gun and your badge is taken away, you're sitting at home not knowing whether or not you have a job. All of a sudden, nobody could fucking call you anymore. Right. And so that pisses me off, because if that were you, what would you want somebody to do? Because I know a lot of the answer is, well, I didn't know what to say. You don't have to say anything sometimes.
Right.
Just let the person know you're there. You can send a quick. I was going through my own stuff after my shooting, and I found out that somebody I know got into a shooting where life was lost. And I reached out to that person and said, hey, I'm sorry. I'm just catching up. I heard this is what happened. I'm here and I will check on you. And I didn't hear back from them for months, but every few weeks I'd send a text message just to let them know, like, hey, I'm here if you need anything. And I think that's all we need sometimes. We just need to know that somebody is there. That isolation, that not knowing if you have a job or what people are saying about you, like that can be a killer right there.
I think if you're doing good, if you're in a good spot, if things are, you're feeling pretty peppy or whatever that day, or whatever period of time you want to go off of, you have to look at, you now have a responsibility to be keeping an eye on people and helping those people that are closest to you. So if you do go down the hall and you say, hey, how's it going? Or how you doing today? And you just keep walking and you don't pay attention, like you mentioned earlier, that you are outside of your responsibility, and you have a different responsibility. If that's your friend, you need to be either, don't say, hey, how you doing today? Because you don't really mean it. Say, hey, buddy, have a great day, or something along those lines, because if you don't have time to sit there and talk with them, either let them know that, or just give them a pat on the back and say, hey, or say their name or whatever. That's enough. But if you say, hey, how's it going? How are you doing? You've opened a door. And if they say, well, I'll tell you, to be honest with you, because have you ever talked to somebody and said, hey, how you doing? And they actually start telling you, oh, I'm doing this way. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck talking to this person now. And now you're kicking yourself. You if you don't mean it, don't ask it. If you don't want to know, don't ask the question. Don't ask a
100%.
question to an answer you don't want to have. So I think we have a responsibility. So if you have somebody in your circle, in your group, and especially like you were saying, if you're not the smartest person in the group, you might be the most empathetic person in the group. And you might be like,
everybody has a role.
Exactly. And you might say, hey, okay, I notice that you're great. I love being around you and everything like that. You're not your normal self. And I want to make sure you get back there, because you are such an inspiration to me, or you're whatever to me. And I'm responsible. You're just as responsible for the other person.
And I said something, and so, going back to what you were saying about like treating people a certain way, um, when you're talking about like how people view you, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? I thought what was very interesting is that I had, even though mine was a medical retirement, I got like the full retirement thing. I got the flag, I got the plaque, I got the ceremony, I got all
That's
that.
cool. Very
Right.
cool.
Um, and I tell people what I realized there is, wow, like you don't know what you mean to people until something like that happens.
Yeah.
Right. So they talk about praising people while they're alive. Don't wait until somebody's dead to say all these nice things to them. Say it now. So I didn't realize like the little things I was doing by like texting, "Hey Ken, you crossed my mind today. How you doing?"
Yeah.
Like what that meant to somebody until later. And I said, so I tell people, if you want to know how you're viewed at your department, retire and see who shows up. That is how you will know if people like you and they've been bullshitting you all this time.
Right.
And I was truly honored and surprised with how many people showed up because of COVID, they were trying to be smaller, but people were showing up because it was at the one of our stations. And then we had
Mhm.
an online option too.
Mhm.
And just between who popped online, Major Greer was there as well, who was
Nice.
online. And my, a lot of, some of my high school friends, college friends, my police friends in Georgia, and then who was in the room. Like I was like, you don't realize how you're viewed until people start talking about you. And you're like, wow, really? And how you treat people. And I
Right.
said, that's what you want. And I'm not saying that in like, that's what you want, like for your ego, but you want people to know, like, you can come to me. I don't want
Mhm.
anything from you.
Mhm.
I just want
Mhm.
you to know that if you ever need an ear, you need a shoulder, I could just sit quietly. I do the same for officers who are out on maternity leave. I'll
Right.
just come to the house and sit. After having a baby is amazing. It's awesome. I think it's like one of the most beautiful things if that's where you are and that's what you want to do. But it also can be very lonely, and there's a lot of trauma that can happen too in
Yeah.
childbirth and things like that. And so just to have somebody sit quietly with you, that means more than, "Hey Ken, how you
Yeah.
feeling today?"
Yeah, exactly. I think about that same thing. You remember when we were in high school or whatever, you go over to your friend's house, and what would
Mhm.
you do? You maybe watch a movie on Friday night or Saturday night. You
In
watch movies.
silence.
Yeah, and nobody said anything, or you just
Yep.
go over to your friend's house and you watch MTV or whatever. That's when MTV had
Mhm.
videos, but
Facts.
but you just sit over. You'd be over there like, what do you want to do? I don't know. Let's just figure something out. I don't know. Nobody wanted to go home if they were at one person's
Yes.
house or something like that. You just didn't. But you'd hang out and you go out and do whatever.
Mhm.
But you just hang out. But as adults, we don't do that. Sometimes
No.
I can imagine, especially with postpartum or whatever. But as an adult, I remember when I was down, I had knee surgery, and I'm down for like
Mhm.
3 weeks
Mhm.
with my knee. I couldn't get off the couch. I'm just laid up. Just it would be, and when it was, I would be home all day by myself. And then when people start coming home, I'm like, hey, cool. We're just watching TV together, but there's somebody else here, you
Yes.
know?
Just
And
sitting.
if you get a friend to just come over, and sometimes you just want somebody to come over and just hang out. Hey, let's watch a
Mhm.
dumb movie. Let's watch Star Wars. I don't care. Let's just do that. We've watched it before. And that makes all the difference in the world.
It's the connection piece. And I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely like, we had meal trains, we had all these things. And I remember a girlfriend of mine, she had had a baby not too long before, maybe a few months before my shooting happened. And I remember because I was actually at her older son's birthday party the day before my shooting.
Oh.
And I remember her coming over with her then infant and saying, "Well, I'm going to help you do stuff around the house." And I was like, "No, I'm good." She's like, "No." So I remember, she has a new baby herself. She came to my house. She sat and she folded laundry on the couch, and
Hmm.
and played with my 22-month-old. You know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
just my back was hurting and my arm was this, and I was still kind of in a daze of trying to figure out what had just happened and was this real? And little things like that make all the difference in the world. We don't have to
Absolutely.
talk about it. We don't have
Absolutely.
to have details. Over time, we will, because a lot of those people share in that trauma. Because what I get now is, oh my God, I totally remember when I first got the call.
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
when I first, when so and so came over and told me, or when I saw it on Facebook. Like, so they took a part of that trauma too.
Right.
I'm very grateful for everyone that has helped my family and any organization like the 100 Club, the Wounded Blue, ERAP, like all these organizations that helped my family over this time, because we do need each other, even citizens that reached out and helped and offered words of encouragement. And I think, like you were saying in the beginning, like we are people, we need to help each other. We need to be more compassionate. We need to ask each other how they're doing because,
Yeah.
and as an industry, we're really good at going out and telling someone else that they're not living their life right, but you won't say that to the person working next to you that might have to save your life. And they doing wrong.
Right.
And I'm not saying I've always been perfect. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, when you don't want that particular officer or deputy to show up on your damn call. You trying to clear so damn fast before they get there, because as soon as they get there, shit's going to hit the fan because they don't know how to talk to people.
Right. Right. Had you just shut your mouth, we wouldn't be in the position we're in. How many times have you thought that or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's not
that's
so much
they're going through something.
Right.
Sometimes.
Right. And it's not an every time thing and whatever. And it doesn't happen. But every once in a while, the wrong thing just gets said because somebody's just not thinking or whatever the case is. And yeah, and I think that goes beyond just law enforcement. I mean, it goes in any first responder position as well.
Yeah.
But it goes in the human side of everything too. Think about other people. Think about those closest to you. And, and I've said it a million times and I'll continue to say it, it's that pebble that drops in a pond, that little thing makes ripples all the way across. And so it's a really big deal.
I mean, just like I said about me and Officer Tony, I didn't know him. I'm 1,800 miles away, but it affected me to the point where anytime I tell my story, I tell his too. Like that's the part of, the beginning of my critical incident. And, even I have a good friend from college. He's a chaplain, and there's an officer from Israel that has reached out to him to pray for me.
That's cool.
That's not down the street.
Yeah. That's not even in your wheelhouse. That's just completely outside of your circle. Yeah.
When you talk about that ripple effect, and even like what you were saying about ownership, right? And having, you have this car. I say all the time, like, we take care of our cars better than we take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
We will get it shined up. You got your lift, you got your tires, you got this, your graphics, and all this stuff.
And you'll take it every weekend, go get it washed, and you're vacuuming 100%. It, and doing all that stuff. Yeah, exactly.
And you'll get all the maintenance done, but you don't take the same time for yourself. We will go car shopping. You'll get, I know we have all this stuff like Carvana and all these online things now, but overall, people still buy cars in person. You will spend weekend after weekend or whatever your days off getting in and out of cars or trucks, trying to find the perfect car that fits your lifestyle and your family. But we don't take the same time and patience and diligence to find care that's going to help us. That's to figure out what's going on and why we're so angry, or why we can't sleep, or why our relationships keep falling apart.
Right.
I understand that, it's getting better, but go see a therapist before shit's too fucked up. Don't wait until it's a disaster, because if you wait by the time it's a disaster or till that critical incident comes along, especially in the first responder world, we're already skeptical. And at least if you were going already, like I was already going to a therapist before my shooting happened, then you know what the process is.
Right.
But if you wait until that trauma has set in, you don't know who to trust, who wants what from you, how they want it. And now you have to learn how to go to a therapist and be open about things. That's a lot. And you were already dealing with life and this critical incident now. And so they have a lot to sift through. And so do you, to get to the root of the problem. So there's nothing wrong with seeing a therapist. It's not just therapy. I think therapy should be the main thing, but there's plenty of other things you can do. We exercise, people hunt, people have hobbies.
You do sports,
woodwork,
sports, karate. I like to do jujitsu.
Yeah.
Go ride your motorcycle, go ride horses, go do what you do.
Mountain biking, like all of these other things that you can do to let off some steam and to kind of put yourself in a different place where you don't have to be responsible for anybody for a while.
Right.
And offload. So, that's always one of my biggest things is don't wait until it's completely broken to try to fix it. I mean, please go, but why not do it now? You know, you
Right.
take care of your car. And even with the department, I've said this time and time again, from the department standpoint, from the management standpoint, the management is giving off the appearance that they care more about the car than they do the person that's driving it.
Right.
They will update equipment. You got to get it to the yard because of preventative maintenance. Fuck that oil change. What about the person who's driving? Like, that's
Right.
my thing.
Right. So the
I
check
get,
engine light will come on the car. Why didn't you get it taken to the shop? Blah, 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 blah. As opposed to, well, what about this person's check engine light? Well, he can go a little longer.
or right, 100%. Like, this person's been on crappy call after crappy call, and nobody pulled them out of service and said, hey, let's go talk, or, I just want to check in with you. Like,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with it, like you said. So it's almost like, I don't care about this equipment that needs maintenance and all this other stuff. The person who's driving it, that's the person that needs that same type of care and attention.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when I go to these peer support trainings, I love them. And I always invite people to bring new people with you to these types of trainings. But what's lacking in the room also is having upper command there.
Yeah.
And I understand the divide, and people aren't always comfortable. But if we're supposed to be one big family, we're one big family, regardless of who has what on their shoulder or on their lapel. So
Right.
you don't get to where you are as a chief or a sheriff without your own bumps and bruises. And we want other people to get help. We want other people to tell their story. You need to tell your story too.
Mm-hmm. There was a shooting, and there's about three or four officers were involved with that shooting. They actually pulled the trigger, but they weren't the only ones there. There were other ones that were there as well in the periphery, and but they were in the room when it happened. They just weren't in a position to fire. There was a guy in front of them, whatever the case may be. So one of the guys, he was able to take a week off or whatever, because he didn't do the shooting. He just happened to be there. He wasn't necessarily involved, so he didn't get the full time off that everybody else did during the investigation. So he goes and he goes back to work after about that week. He was also in the middle of having a trainee at the time. The trainee wasn't there at the shooting or anything like that, but when he got back to work, he had the trainee. So he's doing the FTO thing, and he's training this person. Well, a call came in. They dealt with it, and he blew up at his trainee and blew up at everybody else, and just said some stuff that was just like, wow, that's really odd. So you get to thinking about it. At first, he blows up at everybody else, but then you think, is he mad at them? Why did he do that? And you talk to him and everything. Oh, I'm fine. All this different stuff. And he made one little comment to me, because I said, you good? He goes, yeah, maybe I'm still stressed out from that shooting, but no big deal. It was all good. And it was just a little tiny snippet comment. And then we move on. So what had to happen is I had to go to a supervisor, and I said, we need to be talking to this guy. Has he had time off? Why does he still have a trainee? He has to, that's a lot of attention division. And they're like, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, and so they pulled the trainee from him. But it's that whole idea. And he was just like, I don't know why they took the trainee. But it was, in the long run, he looks at it now and he's like, yeah, I was maybe stressed out a little bit, and it's fine. I need some time after that. And it's a big deal. So you have to be willing to also have the guts to go up to somebody and be like, hey, you're not doing well. Or if you're not going to say anything, I'm going to go say something to somebody so they can say it to you, if that's what I need to do.
And I totally agree. And we've got to stop just leaving people to their own devices. And, you don't have to officially be on a peer support team to be peer support, just by the nature of, hey, how you doing? How's life? Or I know that you've been a little angry, or because really, I don't want to get into it on a call with somebody who's like that, because your head may not be in the game and you pop off. Now you get us into some shit that we didn't even need to be in the first place, and then somebody has to tell my family why I'm injured or dead because of, and I think we have to have more of that mindset of looking out for one another. And I'm not saying in like a cover up type of way, but being like, hey, I want you to be healthy. I want you to be healthy for you. I want you to be healthy for your loved ones. I want you to be healthy for me, so that we can continue doing this thing and doing what we love and do it well. Because when we get angry and disgruntled, I can look back on my career at times when I was angry and disgruntled about things, but I also didn't know what to do with the things I had experienced and seen at work.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was talking to me about anxiety. Nobody was talking to me about a lot of this stuff. And so I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. And when I was like, man, like I was a bitter person. I don't even know why people wanted to be around me back then. I was just like not a very happy person. And so, we have to get that information out there. Um, so that people know, like, if you have a peer support team and there's been a critical incident, I mean, really, everybody that was involved in that call, whether or not they were injured or pulled the trigger or anything, should be contacted.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a long drawn out process. It's just a quick, I wanted to touch bases with you. These are some things that you may experience over the next 24 hours. These are perfectly normal, just considering what happened.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to talk now, cool. If not, if a couple of days passed and you want to talk, here's my number. And if you feel like you need more than me, I have some resources for you. And we have to get out of this. Well, if they need us, they'll come to us.
Right.
That's not how we work. That's
right.
I mean,
Yeah, because I've talked I talked about this just on one of my previous podcasts. Was you get into one of those critical incident debriefs and everybody's sitting around but nobody's talking. And you got maybe with this person saying, well, yeah, we went to this call and this is what happened and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And then the one person who maybe did the most work or something, they're over there just kind of arms folded and they're not saying anything. And you can't make somebody talk. You need to talk about this right now. They're not going to talk about it. They don't need to talk about it. Well, they need to, but you can't make them do it. Do you think a cop who's a type A personality that is always in charge and has control of himself and has a bearing like no other is going to sit there and just break down and say, oh, I feel so bad this happened? No, they're going to do it with somebody they trust and they're going to do it with someone they're secure with. That's why relationship is important, because of those factors.
And the other thing to go with that is, if you have a good relationship with the people at your department, not only that, but your peer support team or your SISM team, whichever one you call it, if you know who's on your team, if they're visible, if they're always around, they're accessible, not just for critical incidents, but just for life issues, period, a divorce, issue with a kid, other health issues. If you can go to them, then those conversations can happen in a incident debrief.
Right.
And then two, like you said, you don't have to talk. Sometimes people don't need to say anything. They just need to hear certain things. But, I've learned through doing peer support that not all departments do debriefs after a critical incident, which is crazy to me, because SWAT debriefs everything. Like, rather,
right.
Like,
because they're trying to
do a tactical debrief constantly.
Yeah. They're trying to figure out, were the radios good? Did we have problems with them? Did you have enough ammo? Were tactics right? Did we go around the house the right way? Did we, whatever the case may be? And they take all these different things. Okay. And then the next time they go to training, those things have been adjusted, fixed, or they ordered the new batteries for the radios or something like that.
Rather they made contact with somebody or not, there's a debrief. So I don't understand why departments don't do the same thing for critical incidents. I've even spoken to people where life has been lost and there was not a debrief. So now you have officers who are walking around not knowing if they made the right decision on that call or not.
Right.
And the department has the ability to fill in the gaps for the person. That's just like we have technology now. Not all departments give officers access to their body cam footage, which I don't understand that either. Maybe somebody that has rank or, can explain that to me. But why wouldn't you provide somebody with information that can fill a gap for you? Because spatially, we know things change under high stress situations. Like when I was asked to describe the house that the shooting happened in, I added a whole nother room to this house. I probably added another few hundred square feet. And then when I saw the layout, I said, that's not the house I got shot in. Or when I thought I dropped my gun inside. I got to see my body cam footage. I did not. I had my gun in my hand. I just couldn't feel it. I had my gun in my hand. You can see it chest height in my body camera until I got hit in the back and I hit the ground. So
Wow.
that loop was closed, right? So little things like that, like
Yeah.
why, and I think sometimes we get into, well, if somebody did something wrong, an officer did something wrong, we don't want to mar their legacy or their character if they've passed. I don't view it like that. This is a teaching opportunity. If somebody did
Mhm.
something that was outside of policy or tactically, something that wasn't tactically sound, we learn from that. We're good at watching videos from other departments. You remember those from academy and any
Yeah.
tactical training you've been to.
You
And
bet.
we talk about, well, what this person could have done differently. I don't see why it's any different when it comes to us, because there's a personal connection to somebody at your department. And I told a commander straight out that came to my house that saw me afterwards, I'm clumsy. So when I fell, I was like, did I fall because I tripped over my feet? Or did I fall because I got shot in the back? And if this could be a teaching moment, I'm totally okay with it, or anything about our call. He says,
Right.
no, you definitely fell because you got shot in the back, because of where you got shot in the back. And I said, but if there's anything teachable that can come out of our critical incident, I'm okay with that, because I
Mhm.
would rather discuss a mistake that I made rather than for us to continue doing it that same way and somebody else gets hurt.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So I think debriefs are critical. I think contacting people soon after a critical incident are critical, and then the follow-up portion. So they may not feel it right now. It may be a week later. I had an incident where it was 3 weeks later that I was having noticeable effects, I should say, from a scene that I had been on where a college student was shot and killed.
Mm.
And I just couldn't shake it. And that was my first experience with our peer support team. So I'm very passionate about peer support. I believe that's something that needs to be from the time you get hired and even after you retire, because
Right.
everything is transitional. We deal with things in life, and you need to have a good team that's credible, that's visible, and that people know the confidentiality is there, because
Exactly.
because we don't trust a lot of people, but we should trust each other, but we don't, you know.
Yeah. 'Cause we're
But
skeptical. It's
yeah,
just
very,
nature of who we are. Yeah.
so I'm always for it. But yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate. I got my medical retirement. I get to be home with my kids. I have had people say to me though, like, wow, you seem to really be okay, and how have you gotten this far? And you know, I said, one, I had a lot of good support. Two, I was in my therapist's office the day after I got out the hospital.
That's good.
Um, and again, I was in a good place prior to my critical incident. And what I went through with my postpartum really helped me, um, afterwards, after the shooting happened, and dealing with feelings and what to do with it and how to cope. Um, but I also tell people, you see me on my good days. So,
Yeah. Yeah. You don't know what goes on that, but that's all right. So
yeah,
what are you doing now?
like I
What's in
said, just
store for you?
being at home with my kids, and which I'm very, it's hard. And I praise all stay-home moms, stay-at-home moms. This is not for the faint at heart. But I'm very grateful that I get to be home with my babies. I get to drop them off. I get to pick them up. I get to take them to their extracurricular activities, because I wasn't able to do that before.
Yeah.
And I just like spending time with them. Like I said, I volunteer with a couple different organizations doing peer support. I really enjoy that. And I speak from time to time. I've had the opportunity to do some presentations. My husband and I got to speak at the COPS National Conference in Oklahoma last
Mhm.
November. And we just spoke in Georgia, and we have a couple other things coming up this year. So I'm glad that we get to share our story in the way we get to share our story, because
Right.
he's not law enforcement, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of
Um,
a cool thing. Yeah.
and also, as far as being like a black female in law enforcement, when we talk about trauma and stuff like that, that's not something you don't see too many officers, who look like me talking about these things either.
Mhm.
And I think, we need a little bit of everybody, because, and I'm not just saying just completely having to do with your racial makeup, but just your experience, your life, because, you and we could connect on the parent level.
Mhm.
You and I look
Right.
different, but we've been in the same career field, but I could come to you and say, oh my goodness, let me ask you something, because your kids are older than mine.
Right.
So, I can act like, okay, so I feel normal, so you never know how people can connect. So that's why we need a little bit of everybody. And I do get into very interesting conversations when I go to these conferences after a presentation from either other minority officers in the room, or even when I talk to parents, when I'm talking about the postpartum, being pregnant on duty,
Right.
dealing with coming back, and even pumping if you choose to breastfeed.
Sure.
Like I get into like very interesting conversations because these are things people don't normally talk about.
Right. Right. Because you know what? People are people are people are people.
Yeah.
I don't care, if you got a giant nose or you got a tiny little nose or you're darker, you're lighter, whatever. People are people. We all feel good, bad, otherwise. We hurt, we love, we have kids or we don't have kids or we were once a kid. It doesn't matter. You're poor, you're rich, we're people. And we need other people. And that's what we're on this planet to do. And I'll say it again. I've said it 100 times. That's what we're on this planet to do is share with people.
100%. I have the same sentiment. I just think there is a little bit something to, though, when you see somebody who looks more like you, because in our different subcultures, whether it's race, culture, religion, we have our little pockets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's why we need a little bit of everybody to represent those little pockets, to be able to continue having these open conversations about things that are different. And that things, I've had male officers come and said, you know what? I have 3 pregnant officers at work right now, and the stuff you're talking about, I had never even thought of before.
Right. Right. It's that same thing that we were talking about, having that that believability factor, that when somebody's if they've done it before, you believe them. You have that, you get, okay, I get it. You've done this before. And so I believe you. Well, it's the same thing. If I think that you know what I'm talking about because we both went to the police academy, or we both been cops, or we're both the same race, or we're both female, or we're both, we've both done whatever. You can relate to that person if they have something. So yeah, you're right. We need to have multiples. It's the same idea, like those heist movies. You ever see those heist movies where the guy's going to go do it? He's got to go get a guy that can drive. So he needs the wheelman. He needs the one that knows how to pick the lock. He knows that he needs the one that's the rock climber. He needs the helicopter pilot. You can't just have all helicopter pilots doing this. We can't have all safe crackers doing it because they can't do other stuff. So we got to have multiple people, multiple types of skill sets and other things, character and everything.
Because it makes a whole.
Exactly.
It makes a whole. When you have multiple people, it makes a whole. And where you may be able to assist somebody in one area, I may be able to assist them in another area, because at the end of the day, the goal is to share, and the goal is to get that person help.
Right.
A lot of times, and it doesn't matter, even on a call, I never got upset if someone else who wasn't the primary solved the problem, if fire solved the problem, because our goal is to help this person. We're here
right.
To,
exactly. You throw away your ego.
I don't care. I just want this person to get assistance. So, that's basically what I'm doing now, as the longer we talked, the more passionate I got and the curse words started flying. That's when I know my passion is kicking in. But, I'm passionate, and I joke all the time. I get a pension, not a paycheck. So I'm more free with where I stand on things, because I'm not afraid of not getting a promotion or a position because of something I've said. Right. Somebody has to be the one to say, hey, this isn't right. And we need to fix people. We need to help people. If you're fucking up, you got to go. You know what I'm saying? But also, we have to take better care of ourselves. And something I say a lot is, please be your own best advocate.
Absolutely.
Because you know how to take care of you better than anybody. And you may not know what you need in that instance, but you know what's not working for you. And you owe it to yourself. You owe it to the person next to you and the people who care about you to say, this isn't working for me. Don't complain about your department not helping you and fucking you over, because we're a very negative bunch and we say that a lot. But did you tell them something was broken? Because sometimes your agency just doesn't give a shit. I've run into that before. And sometimes they have so many moving parts, they didn't know Ken's particular problem was a problem until Ken says something. It's no different than when you were in school. What did the teacher always say? Well, I'm going to stop and I'm going to re-explain this whole thing, because if Ken has a question, at least 3 other people in the class have a question.
Right. Because
So
there's good chance that other kid, the kid that's silent, is just going to sit back
yes.
and like, I don't want to look stupid, but I
Yeah.
get this. Yeah.
And if you're going through trauma, if you're going through a crappy relationship issue, dealing probably with some trauma from a call or something, think about, especially the size of your agency, think about how many other people are going through that same exact thing or worse.
Right.
There's so many departments that have walking wounded around there mentally, because they don't know where to turn. No, it seemed like, oh, you see a shrink, oh, you're crazy. Stop doing that. That's not cute, because you're gonna be the first one. If you say that, you're gonna be the first one to have some shit pop off.
Right.
Because you chose not to open up. You chose not to get help.
Exactly.
And we have to make it, it's very accessible, but we have to make it more accessible, because it's not accessible the same way in all parts of the country either.
Right.
And so, that's why I like being able to have these types of conversations. I like being able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody should they need it. And just being able to listen. That's what people want. They just, even on the street, somebody just they want to feel validated. They want to be heard. They want to be seen. And the same goes for us. We just don't know how to convey that sometimes.
Right. Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I think that, man, I don't even think we've tapped this well, because there's so much more that you can do with it, and so much more conversation we can have. And you can have people that would listen to this and they would be able to say, well, yeah, I had a time and this happened to me and I know exactly what you're talking about because of XYZ. And if we could do that, we would be here for hours. We've already been here for 3 hours, although 2:45, and we're going to be here. No, don't. That's okay, and it's great, because it's what it is. We have to. I think it's great. This is what makes the hero. You look at the way the hero journey works: is you go through all these different things, you do all the stuff you do. The hero has to take a hit, because that's how they build their character. That's how they build who they are. And then you're moving up, and now you're coming out. You're working with these organizations. You're talking with these people. You're still talking to these kids in ROTC and stuff like that. You still have that opportunity to speak into somebody else's life and support them, and you can't do that by sitting on the sidelines or just saying, hey, I'm just gonna sit over here and take my kids to soccer and call it a day. You get to do more, which is really cool. It's really
cool. Especially if you get that second chance. I tell people we don't go through the stuff that we go through just to sit here and do nothing with it. I feel like you do. We're here to help each other. And I feel like we're supposed to share our experience and let people know that they're not the only ones that have experienced this, because we are human beings who deal with a lot of shitty things in our career. You're not built to keep all that stuff inside. It will legit turn into a physical ailment if you don't get that shit out.
It absolutely will. And I firmly believe we're on this planet to serve other people,
100%.
help our fellow man. So I think it's awesome.
Yes.
So how can people find Lindsay if they want to talk to you, or they want to unload on you, or they want to hire you to speak at their shindig? How can people find you?
Well, my little brother, or younger brother, I should say, has helped me put together a website. So they can go to Lindsay Talks, LindsayTalks.com. And there's a little bit about me there and a way to get in contact with me. Also, I will give you my email address as well, which is LMLONGCONSULTING@gmail.com. That's lmlongconsulting@gmail.com. And I mean, I love hearing from people. If there's anything I can ever do for you, you need somebody to talk to, you're looking for resources or services in your area. Like Ken mentioned earlier, I volunteer as a peer advocate with the Wounded Blue. And you can also go to thewoundedblue.org. And if you're looking for somebody to talk to, there's a portal on there where you can send in a request. And, we have some really great people that can, find a therapist in your area, other resources, depending on what it is you're looking for, and kind of help you navigate whatever you're dealing with at that time.
And if you think that Lindsay's cool and you're going to Phoenix and you want to go buy her a cup of coffee, she'll let you buy her coffee.
Tea. I drink tea.
Or if you want to buy her tea, you can drink the coffee. She'll still go to Starbucks with you, but she'll order tea.
Yes, I ordered tea. So, but no, this has been good. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on. I love the things that you talk about and how you talk about it. And if I just want you to continue doing what you're doing and reaching people and just being that voice and reminding us that we are here to help and serve other people.
Yep, that's my hope, my plan, I guess. Things change, but at this point, that's what I think my mission is. So that's cool.
Yes, I
So
dig it.
before we do go, I do want to let everybody know we're very supportive and we are so appreciative of all of our heroes, our nurses, our teachers, those folks who do stuff that other people just won't do, they're not capable of doing, or that's just not what they do. But these people, they put their time and their effort into other people, and that makes a huge
100%.
difference. To our firefighters and our EMTs, you guys going out there making that difference is so cool. And our military veterans, you guys on the front lines, it's super hairy right now with the administration we got. And yeah, I'll say it, with the administration we got and all the stuff happening in Ukraine, Russia, all that stuff like that. It's scary. Who knows what's going to happen? But it is what it is. You guys are standing on that front line and you are poised to do what it is that needs to happen to make sure America stays the country that it is. And I can't thank you enough for it. And then obviously to our law enforcement officers, you guys, every day you go out there, you deal with stuff every single day, and not just every day, multiple times a day, deal with stuff that other people just either couldn't or wouldn't. And we can't thank you enough for keeping us safe and uh, helping us remain the country that we are inside. And honestly, you're like the white blood cells of this body that is ours, that needs to be able to fight off infection and fight off the evil that's in our country. And that's our law enforcement. I thank you so much for it, guys. And that goes for Border Patrol and DEA and everybody else that's out there that goes out there and fights a good fight. I thank you and I appreciate all the work you do. So Lindsay, before we head out, you mentioned at the very beginning, your whole thing is about let me see what you said. You said you mentioned that your grandpa and his legacy, the legacy that
Mhm.
you're leaving behind based off of what your grandpa started. And you want to honor him. And what I remember, when I spoke with Randy Sutton, we talked about legacy as well. He said that was his big thing. That's what he has to leave, is his legacy. And I think you're on the right track. And what I remember one time from a guy I spoke with, not Randy, but a different gentleman. And he said, your legacy, there's three things that's going to be said about you when you leave somewhere. And that's either they're going to be like, man, I'm glad that person's gone. They're going to say who, or they're going to say, man, I'm sure glad you were here. And I hate to see you leave.
Mhm.
And from what you're saying, all those people that showed up for your retirement, you left a lasting legacy because they hated to see you leave. You're still in their hearts, their minds, and I'm sure you're still in contact with a lot of them, but you know, you left a legacy there. And I think you're still doing that with all the people that you have in your life. You're developing, you're creating a legacy that's making a big difference. And my hat's off to you, even though I'm not wearing one.
Well, I do appreciate that, and I definitely believe that we leave a legacy in people, not with things.
Yep.
We can have things named after us. We can change policies and things like that, but it's the people that you imprint on. I don't care what you do for a living. If you are like, a Major Greer who I aligned with because she reminded me a lot of my own mother. My mother's very strong. My mother was a female in a male dominated industry in the
Mhm.
law in the record business as a record executive, and did a lot of things as a first, first woman, a first black woman, and things like that in her field, which was fantastic. And Major Greer, we were talking about earlier, people completing people. Major Greer kind of completed that. And she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And she has now left a legacy with me because of things she imparted on me. And now I get
Right.
to pass that on to other people. And I
Right.
think that's very important. And again, like what you keep saying, we are here to help other people. And that's part of helping people is by leaving a legacy with those around us.
Absolutely correct. I couldn't have said it better. And I don't have to ask you for any final thoughts now because you just gave it to us. So,
Thank you.
so Lindsay, thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I've had a fantastic time, and I think everybody else, that gets to know you, gets to hear from you. They'll be blessed as well. So
I appreciate it.
So for the What's a Hero podcast, for Lindsay McCall Long, I have been Ken Frownfelter, and we are clear.